This absolute unit woke up in a goddamn freezer and said absolute zero. He iced legends, froze demons, ended careers with temperature, and still looked bored. Grandmaster of zero chill and even less patience. The ninja world never stood a chance. Watch this ice god cook.
6 feet by 6 feet. Stone walls sweating frost. A door of reinforced steel with a seal burned into it, and behind that door in the black, a 6-year-old boy sat with his back against the wall and his breath coming out in white clouds. Danzo Shimura called this room the Forge. He had used it 11 times. 9 of those children came out as root. 2 came out as corpses. The math worked for him. Naruto Uzumaki had been in there for 3 days. No food, no light, no sound except the drip of water freezing halfway down the wall before it ever hit the floor. Root did this to break a child's sense of self, hollow him out, and pour something obedient into the space left behind. It worked. It had always worked. Except the cold was doing something to this one. It was not hurting him. It was waking him up. The temperature in that cell had dropped below freezing on the first night, and Naruto had stopped shivering by the second. His skin had gone pale. His lips should have turned blue. Instead, his fingertips began to itch, then burn, then hum with something that felt older than his own heartbeat. And then the memories came. They did not arrive gently. They hit him like an avalanche breaking loose off a mountain face, a mountain temple buried in snow, wind screaming through stone corridors. A boy in blue robes learning to hold a stance until his legs gave out, then holding it longer. A brother's voice, colder than the cell, colder than anything, calling him weak. A yellow-masked warrior with a spear and a burning skull, and the years it took to turn that hatred into brotherhood. A pit of fire and screaming souls that stretched past the horizon. Chains. A crown of bone on a throne that should have belonged to no one. A god with 4 arms laughing, and a fist of pure ice punching straight through that laughter. Kuei Liang. The name landed in the boy's chest like a hammer on an anvil. Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei. The one who took a clan of assassins built on murder for hire and rebuilt it from the inside out. The one who walked into hell as a revenant slave and walked out of it with his soul still in his hands. The man who had faced Shao Kahn, Shinnok, Chronica, Sector, his own brother, and the worst that a dozen realms could throw at him. And who had answered every single one of them with the same measured voice and the same absolute zero. Naruto sat in the black and lived an entire lifetime in 3 hours. When it was over, he opened his eyes. They were glowing, a hard glacial blue, bright enough to light the frost patterns crawling up the walls. The boy stood. His body was small, malnourished, and shaking from 3 days without food, and none of that seemed to matter to the thing looking out from behind his face. He rolled his shoulders. He tested his stance. He exhaled, and the breath came out as a plume of white that hung in the air and stayed there, crystallizing into tiny floating shards that caught the light of his own eyes. The water on the walls stopped dripping. It froze solid in place, mid-fall, like someone had paused the world. Naruto Uzumaki looked at the steel door and understood something with total clarity. They had put him in the cold to break him. They had put a cryomancer in a freezer. Outside, 2 root operatives stood in the corridor waiting for the extraction window. One of them checked the seal on the door and frowned, because the metal under his glove had gone white with frost, and the frost was spreading, running up the doorframe in threads that made a sound like glass cracking under a boot. "Report," said the other one. The first one never got the chance. The door did not open. It came apart, blown off its hinges in a spray of frozen steel fragments that punched into the far wall like shrapnel, the boom of it rolling down the corridor and shaking dust from the ceiling, and the temperature dropped. Not by a few degrees. It fell off a cliff, -50 in under 2 seconds. The lamps along the wall guttered as the oil in them thickened. The moisture in the air turned to floating diamond dust. One operative's eyelashes froze shut mid-blink. Naruto walked out of the smoke barefoot, 6 years old, frost trailing off his shoulders like steam off dry ice. The nearest root Anbu did what root Anbu are trained to do. He drew his katana and went for a clean killing stroke to the neck of an unarmed child. Naruto caught the blade, bare hand. Palm closed around the edge. The steel screamed as the temperature ripped through it, the metal turning white from the point of contact outward in a wave. And then Naruto squeezed, and the entire sword burst into ceramic-like fragments that clattered across the floor. The operative stared at the 8 inches of ruined hilt left in his fist. Naruto looked up at the blank porcelain mask and gave him an assessment in the voice of a man who had graded warriors for a living. You rely on the shadows, but you lack discipline. Then he let go. A blizzard erupted out of his body in every direction at once. A rolling white wall of wind and ice that tore down the corridor and hit the extraction team like a train. 6 operatives went off their feet. The wind slammed them into the stone walls, and the ice followed a half-second behind, climbing over their arms, their chests, their legs, sealing them there in glassy blue casings, 4 inches thick. 6 living statues, mounted on the walls of Danzo's own facility, eyes still moving behind the ice. Naruto walked between them without hurrying. He had done this in colder places against better opponents. He got 20 meters before a voice stopped him. Impressive. Danzo Shimura stood at the end of the corridor with his cane in one hand and his one visible eye fixed on the child. 2 more root flanked him. Behind that bandaged calm, the old man was already running the numbers on how to leash this. You have exceeded every projection. Danzo said, Konoha requires a weapon. I can shape you into. The floor under Danzo's feet turned white. He got 1 step of movement in before the ice climbed his cane and welded it to the stone, and the frost went up his sleeve and locked his arm at the elbow. And the entire corridor's temperature dropped hard enough that his breath came out as a solid white cloud and stayed hanging in front of his face. Naruto had not raised a hand. He had simply looked at him. Weapons are wielded by other men, the boy said. I am not a weapon. I am a Grandmaster. Understand the difference before you speak to me again. Danzo's eye went wide. It was the only part of him that could still move freely. There is a code, Naruto continued. It was written by my clan in a place you would never survive. It says that a warrior who preys on children has already lost the right to call himself a warrior. He tilted his head. You threw me in the cold to make me obedient. Consider what you have made instead, and consider it every night for the rest of your life. He stepped past the frozen man and out of the light of the corridor. Danzo stayed pinned to the floor for 40 minutes before his own agents chiseled him loose. The 3rd Hokage was signing a fishing permit when the door to his office opened without a knock. Hiruzen Sarutobi had been Hokage across 2 wars. He had seen a man swallow a mountain summon. He had watched Tsunade punch through a battlement. He had personally cataloged more horrors than any living person in the village. He had never seen a 6-year-old walk into his office coated in frost. Naruto stopped in front of the desk. Ice crystals still clung to his hair and his eyelashes. His feet left white prints on the wood floor that took 10 seconds to fade. His eyes, which the old man had known for 6 years as bright ordinary blue, were burning like the inside of a glacier. The ambu in the rafters shifted. Hiruzen raised one hand and stopped them. Naruto-kun, he said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. Root took me on the 12th, Naruto said. They held me in a sealed cell below the Eastern District for 3 days without food or light. Their intent was conditioning. Their extraction team is currently frozen to the walls of that corridor. They are alive. All of them. A pause. I made that choice. I want you to know it was a choice. Hiruzen's pipe had gone out. He did not notice. There was a thing happening in that room that the old man struggled to name. The child's posture, the way his hands rested, the absolute absence of pleading in his voice. Hiruzen had stood in rooms with Hashirama Senju. He had stood in rooms with the 4th. He knew what it felt like when someone in the room outweighed everyone in it, and he was feeling it right now, coming off a boy who barely reached his desk. What happened to you? Hiruzen asked. I remembered, Naruto said. Remembered what? Who I was before. The old man set his pipe down. And who were you? Naruto held up his hand. The air above his open palm shimmered, moisture pulling in from across the room, and a rose of pure blue ice bloomed there in 3 seconds flat, every petal edged sharp enough to cut. The sound it made forming was a series of tiny gunshot cracks. My name was Kuei Liang, he said. I was the Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei. I led a clan of warriors out of corruption and rebuilt it on honor. I fought sorcerers, emperors, and gods. I died, and I was made into something worse than dead. And I came back from that too. He closed his hand. The rose crumbled into glitter. I have kept every memory. I have kept every skill. This body is young. The man inside it is not. Silence in the Hokage's office. One of the Anbu in the rafters had stopped breathing. Hiruzen sat back in his chair, and for a long moment he simply looked at the boy he had failed to protect, and felt something in his chest crack and reassemble itself. Because he had run this scenario in his nightmares for 6 years. The Jinchuriki wakes up angry. The Jinchuriki learns what the village did to him, and decides the village should burn for it. He had a contingency file in his desk drawer for exactly that, and he had hated himself for writing it. And instead, this child had walked out of a torture cell, had every reason in the world to level a district, and had chosen to leave 6 men breathing and come tell him about it in person. You spared them, Hiruzen said. Killing them would have proved Danzo right about what I am. Naruto's tone did not shift. I refused to give him that satisfaction. The old Hokage laughed once, a short, disbelieving sound with an edge of grief in it, and rubbed his hand down his face. What do you want, Naruto? Autonomy. The word landed like a stone on the desk. I will train on my own terms, in my own way, in a place of my choosing. I will attend the academy because I want to understand this village's methods before I improve on them. I will follow your laws. I will answer your summons. In exchange, Root does not approach me, no council places a hand on my life, and no one dictates my growth. That is a great deal of freedom for a 6-year-old. It is the exact amount of freedom for me. Hiruzen studied him for a full 10 seconds. There was no bluff to read. That was the terrifying part. The boy was not negotiating. He was informing. Granted, Hiruzen said. Naruto inclined his head. A short, formal bow, hands at his sides, the kind that came from a place with 1,000 years of tradition behind it. Then we understand each other, Lord Third. He turned to leave. Naruto. The old man's voice caught him at the door. The village has treated you badly. Yes. Will you hold that against them? Naruto paused with his hand on the frame, and the frost that had crept out from his fingers into the wood receded like a tide going out. A clan is worth saving even when it is rotten, he said. I know that better than anyone alive. I intend to save this one. He glanced back, and those glacier eyes held the old man's for a beat. Whether it deserves it or not. Then he was gone, and Hiruzen Sarutobi sat alone in his office and took the contingency file out of his desk drawer and burned it in the ashtray. The rumors moved faster than the Anbu reports. A boy walked out of a Root Black site and left the extraction team hanging on the walls. A boy froze Danzo Shimura's arm to a cane in his own basement. A boy made the 3rd Hokage go silent for a full minute. By the end of that month, 3 drunks decided the rumors were exaggerated and cornered Naruto in an alley off the market district. The first one got 2 words out. Naruto slammed both palms into the ground, and the technique came out of his mouth flat and even, like a man calling a play. Ground ice. The frost hit the alley like a shockwave. It went out from his hands in a spreading white circle, cracking as it went, the moisture in the dirt and the puddles and the cracks between the stones all seizing at once. 3 grown men went down on their backsides with their legs sealed in ice up to the knees and their bottles frozen solid in their hands. Naruto stood up and dusted off his palms. You will thaw in 6 hours, he said. Use them. Then he walked to the ramen stand and ordered miso and Tuchi Ichiraku, who had watched the whole thing through the flap of his shop and had never in his life been so shocked while holding a ladle, served him the biggest bowl in the building and refused to take his money. The village stopped bothering Naruto Uzumaki after that. Not out of kindness. Out of a survival instinct that ran straight down the spine. He built his training ground himself, in a clearing 4 kilometers past the old Senju training posts, where nobody went anymore. He cleared it in an afternoon. He raised 8 pillars of ice around the perimeter and carved the Lin Kuei's mark into each one, and he ran the same drills at dawn that a boy in a mountain temple had run 1,000 years in a world away. Stance, breathing, the forms, the endless brutal repetition that most shinobi skipped Because chakra made it feel unnecessary, he learned very quickly that chakra changed the equations in his favor. Kuei Liang's cryomancy had been fueled by a bloodline and a soul. This body had a chakra network like a river system and a tailed beast sitting in the reservoir. When he pushed his power through that engine, the output was obscene. Where Kuei Liang could freeze a man, Naruto could freeze a lake, which brought him, 3 months in, to the thing sitting behind the bars in his own gut. He went in through meditation, sat under one of his ice pillars, slowed his heart, and dropped into the sewer of his own mindscape. So, the voice hit like a landslide. The meat finally comes to see me. 2 eyes the size of houses open in the black behind the cage. The 9-tailed fox pressed its face to the bars, teeth as long as a man, malice pouring off it thick enough to bend the air. You stink of something old, boy, something that does not belong in this world. Kurama's lip pulled back. I have eaten gods. I will wear your skull like a claw the size of a bus swept out through the bars. Naruto did not step back. He raised one hand, and where the fox's claw entered the space in front of him, the water on the floor exploded upward into a wall of jagged blue ice, and the claw slammed into it and stuck. The frost climbed the claw. It went up the digit, past the knuckle, onto the paw, and Kurama felt something no living creature had ever managed to do to him. It felt cold, down in the marrow, down where the chakra lived. The fox recoiled with a sound like a mountain moving. Naruto lowered his hand and looked up at the largest predator in the elemental nations with an expression that had never once, in 2 lifetimes, included fear. I have stood in front of Shao Kahn, he said. I have stood in front of Shinnok on his throne with hell burning behind him. You are large. You are loud. You are the 4th or 5th most frightening thing I have personally addressed, and I am not certain about 4th. What? I will make you an offer, and you should hear it as the courtesy it is. Naruto's voice did not rise. I will never use you as a battery. I will never drag your chakra out of you against your will. I will never treat you as an object, because I have been treated as an object, and I would rather die again than do it to another living thing. He paused. In exchange, you will keep your hatred to yourself while I work, and when the day comes that I open that cage, and it will come, you will walk out of it as an ally and not a slave. The 9-tailed fox stared down at a 6-year-old for a very long time. You are insane, Kurama said finally. I am the Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei, Naruto said. The 2 conditions are compatible. He turned and walked out of his own mind, and behind him, the strongest tailed beast in existence flexed a claw that still ached with frostbite and thought, for the first time in a very long time, that this container might be interesting. The academy did not know what to do with him. Iruka Umino had a theory, in his first week, that the Ice Boy rumors were the usual village nonsense, blown up past all recognition. He revised that theory on day 3, when he assigned a target throwing drill, explained the exercise for 90 seconds, and turned around to find Naruto's 10 kunai already in the center ring, and the boy sitting back at his desk with his hands folded. When did you? During the explanation, Naruto said. You were thorough. I appreciated it. Iruka went home that night and drank 2 beers he had not planned on. Naruto was, in the words of the frustrated academy staff, unmarkable. Written exams came back flawless. Taijutsu spars ended in under 6 seconds. Never with an injury, always with the opponent flat on their back, and Naruto offering a hand up. He never showed off. He never raised his voice. He never once asked for attention, and somehow every single eye in that room tracked him whenever he stood. The girls decided he was mysterious. Half the class was afraid of him. Sasuke Uchiha spent an entire year trying to figure out why the blonde kid in the blue tunic and black face mask made his skin crawl, and eventually landed on the answer he hated most. Because Naruto looked at him like he was young. 2 people found their way past the wall. The first was Shikamaru Nara, who fell asleep in class for 2 years straight and woke up exactly once. The day Naruto sat down across from him on the roof, set up a shogi board, and played him to a draw in 19 moves. Shikamaru sat up. He actually sat up. You've played before. For 30 years, Naruto said, and reset the board. You're 8. That is the least interesting fact about me. Naruto moved a piece. Your opening was aggressive because you assumed I would be. Adjust. They played for 4 hours. Shikamaru's mother had to send someone to find him. From that day forward, the laziest genius in the village had a standing appointment with the strangest boy in Konoha, and neither of them ever discussed it, and both of them showed up every single time. The second was Choji Akimichi, and that friendship started because of food, the way all good things involving Choji did. Naruto shared his lunch on a day Choji forgot his, and did it without commentary, and did it again the next week when Choji forgot, on purpose to test whether the first time was a fluke. Choji had a very refined instrument for detecting pity in other people, because he had spent his whole life swimming in it. There was none coming off Naruto. There was just a boy handing him half a bento and saying, "The Akimichi convert caloric intake into chakra output at a rate no other clan can match. You are not overeating, you are refueling. Anyone who says otherwise has never read a scroll." Choji cried in the bathroom for 10 minutes afterward and told nobody. Which brings us to the training ground, in 11 seconds, and 3 genin who made the worst decision of their short careers. They were 15. They had been genin for a year, which in the mind of a 15-year-old is functionally a career. They found Choji Akimichi alone by the log posts and started in on the classic material, loud enough for the wind to carry it. Choji's ears went red. His hands closed. He did what he always did, which was stand there and take it, because taking it was easier than the thing that happened when he stopped. Then a boy in a blue high-collared tunic stepped between them, and the temperature on that field dropped by 15 degrees so fast the grass went white. Naruto did not shout. He did not posture. He looked at 3 older, taller armed genin the way a mountain looks at weather. "Walk away," he said. "This fight will be your last." The lead one, big kid, Chunin hopeful, mouth first and brain fourth, laughed and threw a haymaker straight at Naruto's head. Naruto's hands came together. Ice clone. The air in front of him seized and formed, in a single crack of sound, a solid replica of himself. Same stance, same posture, blue and glassy and cold enough to burn. The genin's fist connected with its chest at full commitment. The flash freeze went up his forearm in under a second. It hit his elbow, and the boy's scream came out at a pitch that startled birds out of the tree line, and he went down on his knees clutching an arm that had gone white to the joint. The second genin lunged. Naruto sidestepped, hooked his ankle, and put him face first into the frozen dirt. The third one drew a kunai, which was a genuinely impressive commitment to a bad plan. Naruto caught his wrist, froze the kunai in his hand so he could not let go of it, and swept his legs out from under him. 3 bodies on the ground, one of them still screaming. Shikamaru, who had walked up halfway through with a bag of chips and had not managed to open it, looked at his own hand and then at the field. 11 seconds, he said. 9, Naruto corrected, standing up and adjusting his collar. You started counting late. He crouched next to the one with the frozen arm, who was sobbing openly now, and pressed 2 fingers against the ice. It receded under his touch, thawing in a wave, leaving the arm red and swollen and entirely intact. You will keep the arm, Naruto said. Consider that a gift, and consider what I could have done instead. He stood. If you speak to my friend that way again, I will not be feeling generous. The 3 of them ran. One of them left a sandal. Choji stood there with his mouth open. You didn't have to. You are Akimichi, Naruto said. Your clan's strength has fed armies. Someday you will be a mountain that walks, and those 3 will be filing paperwork in an office. He picked up the abandoned sandal and handed it to Choji. Until then, I will handle the noise. Choji started crying again, right there in the open, and Shikamaru finally opened his chips and muttered, "Troublesome," in a voice that was noticeably thick. Graduation should have been a formality. It was for about 9 minutes. Mizuki, who had a plan involving a forbidden scroll and a naive orphan, executed the first half of that plan and then made contact with the second half. They hate you, Naruto. You're the fox. You're the demon that... The forest around them went white. Mizuki's next word never happened, because a projectile of condensed blue light left Naruto's palm with a crack like a rifle shot, and the technique got called before it landed. Ice ball. It caught Mizuki's center mass, and the freeze went outward in every direction at once, over the chest, down the legs, up the throat, sealing his jaw mid-syllable. He stood there in the moonlight, a man-shaped block of ice with his mouth open and his eyes darting. Naruto picked up the scroll, brushed the dirt off it, and looked at the frozen traitor with something close to pity. "You wanted to know what I am," he said. "I am the man who once carried the same weight you just tried to break me with, and I carried it for years, in a world far less forgiving than this one." He tucked the scroll under his arm. "You will thaw at dawn. The Anbu will collect you long before then." Iruka arrived 4 minutes later, ready to die for a student, and instead found the student sitting on the traitor like a bench, reading the forbidden scroll by moonlight and taking notes. "Naruto." "The multi-shadow clone technique," Naruto said, without looking up. "The chakra cost is extreme, the memory transfer is unlimited, and every academy in this village should be teaching it to anyone with the reserves to survive it. Your leadership is leaving a resource on the table." Iruka opened his mouth, closed it, sat down on the grass. "Are you okay?" he managed. Naruto looked up, and for 1 second the glacier eyes softened by a degree. "You came out here believing you were about to die for me," he said. "You made that decision before you knew anything about what I could do." He rolled the scroll shut. "That is the definition of a warrior, Iruka-sensei. I have known men in 3 lifetimes who could not have made that choice. Thank you." Iruka Umino put his face in his hands and laughed until he nearly threw up. Team assignments came down the following week. Team 7, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, Naruto Uzumaki. Sakura's reaction was a full-body flinch followed by a strangled, "The ice guy?" Sasuke's reaction was silence and a locked jaw because he had spent 5 years measuring himself against a wall, and being placed on a team with that wall meant the measuring would now be daily. Then they waited 3 hours for their sensei. Sakura complained for the first hour. Sasuke sulked for the second. Naruto spent all 3 running through his forms in the corner of the classroom and made no comment whatsoever. At the 90-minute mark of hour 3, he stopped, wiped his hands, and walked to the window. "He is coming," Naruto said. "Come outside." "How do you?" Moisture in the air displaces when a body moves through it. His route crosses the training ground in 90 seconds. Sakura looked at Sasuke. Sasuke looked at the window. Both of them followed the boy outside, because at this point, arguing had a documented failure rate. Kakashi Hatake dropped onto the training ground with a book in one hand and an apology on his lips about a black cat and a very long road. His boots hit the packed dirt near the training post. There was a crack. Sharp, sudden, like someone breaking a pane of glass in the next room. And Kakashi Hatake, elite jonin, former Anbu captain, the copy ninja of 1,000 techniques, found both feet welded to the ground under 3 inches of solid ice. He tugged. Nothing moved. He looked down at his own legs with the expression of a man reviewing his life choices. "Oh," Kakashi said. Above him, on the branch of a nearby tree, Naruto Uzumaki stood with one hand extended, and the moisture in the morning air was spiraling into his grip, compressing, hardening, tightening into a 2-foot blade of blue ice with a hilt and an edge and a weight to it that made the branch dip under his feet. The Kori blade. Sakura made a noise like a kettle. Naruto dropped from the branch and landed without a sound 6 feet from his new sensei. "A warrior is always punctual, sensei," he said. "Prepare yourself." And then the bell test started, and it lasted 4 minutes, and Kakashi Hatake would describe those 4 minutes in his official report as instructive. Here is what happened. Kakashi broke his boots free with a burst of chakra, hopped back, and reached for the standard opening. Get distance, assess, let the genin exhaust themselves. Naruto did not permit distance. Ice slide. The ground beneath him glazed over in a rushing white streak, and Naruto dropped onto it, one knee bent, and shot forward at a speed that left Sakura's eyes tracking empty air. He crossed the gap in a half second and came up out of the slide with the Kori blade already swinging. Kakashi parried with a kunai. The blade did not chip. The kunai frosted over in his hand, and he had to drop it before his fingers went numb. He pulled up his headband. The Sharingan spun open. And here is the thing about the Sharingan. It reads muscle, chakra flow, and intent, then predicts the next motion. It is the single greatest counter tool in the elemental nations against a fighter who trains in patterns. Naruto had spent 30 years fighting shapeshifters, sorcerers, and beings who could read minds. He stopped fighting in patterns. Every strike changed axis halfway through. A downward cut became a horizontal sweep, became a reverse elbow. He switched the blade between hands mid-motion. He threw a punch and let the punch become an open palm and let the palm plant on the ground. Ground ice. The field went white in a 2-second wave, and Kakashi's left foot caught. Just the toe. Just enough. Naruto was inside his guard before the Jonin's brain finished processing the loss of mobility. 2 fingers hooked both bells. He was gone in the same motion, sliding out backward on a sheet of ice, coming to a stop 30 feet away with both bells hanging from his index finger. Silence on the training ground. Sasuke had not moved. Sakura had not blinked. A bird landed on the training post and left again because it was too cold. Kakashi Hatake looked at his own belt, where 2 bells had been approximately 6 seconds ago. Then he looked at the 12-year-old holding them. This is the demon container, he thought. This is the boy the council wanted watched. This is Minato-sensei's son. And then, with a kind of grim comedy, I have to teach him something. For 3 years. What? What am I going to teach him? Out loud, he said, well. Naruto tossed 1 bell to Sakura and 1 to Sasuke. Sakura fumbled hers. Sasuke caught his and stared at it like it was going to bite him. I don't want your charity, Sasuke said. It is not charity, Naruto said. It is the point of the exercise. 2 bells, 3 students, 1 obvious lesson. Kakashi-sensei built the test to see whether we would betray each other for advancement. He looked at Kakashi. I removed the variable. Did I pass? Kakashi rubbed the back of his neck and after a long moment started laughing. A genuine, helpless, one-eyed crinkle laugh. Yeah, he said. You passed. All of you passed. Please stop freezing my feet. That depends entirely on your punctuality. Kakashi Hatake was never late again for the rest of his life. 2 months of D ranks later, Team 7 took a C rank escort for a bridge builder named Tazuna, and the mission was a lie from the first sentence out of the old man's mouth. Naruto knew within 10 minutes. He said nothing because he wanted to see the shape of the trap before he broke it. The trap arrived on the 3rd day. It was not 2 demon brothers. Gato had learned that hiring small teams got him small results, so he had spent his money on a platoon, 22 water-style mercenaries out of the coastal syndicates, men who had drowned entire caravans, coordinated, disciplined, and used to overwhelming a target with sheer weight of numbers. They came out of the mist on both sides of the road at once. Sasuke got off 2 kunai and 1 fireball before 3 of them boxed him in and put him on his back with a water whip around his ankle. Sakura made it in front of Tazuna with a kunai up and her hands shaking, which, for the record, took genuine courage and bought her exactly 4 seconds before a water bullet took her legs out. 22 trained killers, 2 12-year-olds, 1 jonin who was already moving. Kakashi never got there. Naruto walked into the center of the road, dropped to 1 knee, and slammed both palms into the dirt. Ground ice! What happened next got told in that region for the next 20 years. The shockwave went out in a ring, and it did not just frost the surface. It drove down through the soil and found every drop of moisture in the packed earth and in the roadside grass and in the mist itself, and it took all of it at once. The road turned to a mirror in a heartbeat and kept going, out 50 meters in every direction. The sound of it, a continuous rolling crack, 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 like a frozen lake splitting under pressure. 22 pairs of feet locked into the ground. The mist froze in the air and fell as powder. And then came the second wave, the one nobody was ready for, the temperature. It plunged so fast that the water styles those mercenaries had prepared and were holding in their chakra networks turned against them. 2 men at the outer edge of the freeze zone simply dropped, down unconscious, their bodies shutting down from thermal shock. The rest stood there in a perfect frozen ring, up to their thighs in ice, weapons hanging, breath fogging, staring at a 12-year-old boy who was already standing up and brushing off his knees. Sasuke Uchiha's kunai was still halfway out of his pouch. He looked at it. He looked at the field. He put it back. Do not struggle, Naruto told the platoon. You will tear the muscle off your own legs, and I have no interest in watching it. Kakashi-sensei will collect your names. 1 mercenary, big man, scarred throat, some kind of squad leader, found his voice. What are you? Lin Kuei, said Naruto, and kept walking. Kakashi arrived, took in the frozen ring, took in his 2 flattened students, took in 22 of the most feared water mercenaries on the coast, standing helpless in an ice field, and said, "Right." Tazuna, still clutching his sake bottle, sat down in the road and drank all of it. Zabuza Momochi came for them the next morning, and he brought the mist with him. He was, in fairness to the man, one of the strongest missing nin alive, the demon of the hidden mist, a man who had killed his entire graduating class before he was old enough to shave. His hidden mist technique cut off sight, sound, and smell, and in that mist he had killed hundreds of people who had been very confident right up until they were not. He went for Tazuna. Kakashi intercepted. The 2 jonin went into the water, and the water prison closed around Kakashi in under a minute, because Zabuza had built his entire career on that exact sequence, which left Sakura on Tazuna and Sasuke charging in, and a boy in a Hunter 9 mask stepping out of the mist between them. Haku. The needles came in a flat silver rain. Sasuke got his guard up in time to survive, and not in time to win. And then the ground under him grew a ring of standing mirrors, 60 panels of ice, each one a slab of glass reflecting the boy inside it from every possible angle, closing overhead into a dome. The demonic ice mirrors. Kakashi, from inside his prison of water, shouted a warning that nobody could act on. Inside the dome, Haku's reflection appeared in every panel at once, and Sasuke Uchiha learned what it feels like to be shot at from 60 directions by an opponent moving faster than his eyes could follow. 3 seconds in, he was bleeding from 11 places. 10 seconds in, he was on one knee. And then somebody walked into the dome. Not through a gap. There were no gaps. Naruto put one hand on a mirror panel, and the panel iced over from the inside, went brittle, and came apart into powder. And he stepped through the hole he had made like a man walking through a doorway. Haku's voice from all 60 mirrors at once carried the first note of uncertainty it had held in years. "You should not be able to do that. You should not be doing this at all," Naruto said. Haku fired. Every mirror discharged at once. Hundreds of senbon crossing the interior of the dome in a converging storm, and there was no dodging it, and Naruto did not try. Frost armor. A skin of ice bloomed over him in a half second. Thin, close-fitting, reactive, forming at each impact point a fraction before the impact arrived. The senbon hit him across the chest, the arms, the shoulders, the throat. Every single one of them broke. They did not stick. They did not bounce. They snapped on contact like dry twigs and fell around his feet in a ring of ruined metal, and the sound of it was a light, terrible chiming. And Sasuke Uchiha, bleeding on the ground with 3 needles in his thigh, looked up at that and felt the last of his pride go out of him like air from a punctured lung. Naruto stood in the center of the dome in a rain of broken weapons and did not so much as flinch. Then he did something Haku never expected. He looked at him. Through the mask, through the technique, through the reflections, right at the person underneath. And when he spoke, his voice had lost some of its edge, and what replaced it was worse, because it was recognition. "Your ice is beautiful," Naruto said. "It is also weak. You know nothing of mine. You were found in the snow. Someone took you in when the world had thrown you away, and you have spent every day since paying him back with your life, because you decided a long time ago that you were a tool and tools do not get to want things." Naruto took one step forward. "You control ice, but your heart weeps. Your ice is fragile because it is forged in subservience. Mine is forged in honor." 60 reflections went completely still. "Enough," Haku said, and there was a crack running through the word. "Yes," Naruto agreed, "it is." And he let go. Absolute zero. There is no clean way to describe what happened inside that dome. The air itself gave up. The temperature fell off the edge of any measurable scale, and it did it in a radius that filled the entire interior. And the moisture in that space turned to falling crystal, and then stopped falling because there was nothing left to fall through. Haku's mirrors were made of ice. That should have protected them. It did the opposite. The thermal stress hit 60 panels at once. Ice at Haku's temperature meeting ice at a temperature that had no business existing in this world. And every mirror in that dome fractured from the inside out in the same instant. The sound was an entire building's worth of windows dropping from 100 feet up. 4 seconds. That was the lifespan of a technique that had never been broken by anyone. Haku fell out of the air and hit the bridge deck hard, and before he could roll to his feet, Naruto was already there. 3 strikes, palm to the sternum, knife hand to the wrist, elbow to the shoulder joint. 1 sweep, 1 grab. The Senbon pouch came off Haku's belt and hit the ground 12 feet away, and Haku was flat on his back with a boy's knee on his chest and his mask cracked down the middle, and every technique he knew was gone. Nothing was broken. Naruto had made certain of that. He reached down and pulled the 2 halves of the mask away. A young face, long black hair, wide brown eyes with tears already in them, because being seen is so much harder than being beaten. "Kill me," Haku said. "I failed him. I have no other use." Naruto crouched there in the middle of the ruined bridge, and the frost around him began to pull back. "I was a slave once," he said, "not to a man, to something worse than a man. I served in the dark and I killed people I loved, and I called it duty because the alternative was admitting I had a choice." His voice went low. "Do you know what saved me?" Haku shook his head. "Someone reached into the pit and offered me a hand, and I nearly killed him for it." And he offered again. Naruto stood and held out his hand. "For the Lin Kuei, I offer you a choice. Die for a tyrant or live for yourself." Haku lay there on the cold stone with the mist rolling off the water and his entire world coming apart. Then he reached up and took the hand. 20 feet away, standing in a prison of his own making, Kakashi Hatake watched a 12-year-old dismantle the demonic ice mirrors in 4 seconds and then take the time to save the person inside them, and thought, with total sincerity, "Minato-sensei, wherever you are, I have absolutely no idea what to do with your son." And across the bridge, Zabuza Momochi had stopped fighting. He was standing in the mist with his cleaver on his shoulder and his water prison technique running on autopilot, and he was watching his most loyal tool get lifted to his feet by an enemy, and something in the demon of the hidden mist's chest was doing a thing he had spent 20 years making sure it would never do again. "Haku," he said. "Zabuza-san." The boy's voice broke on the second syllable. "I am sorry." "Shut up." Zabuza's grip on his blade shifted. "You think I bought you off the street because I needed a weapon?" A pause the length of a knife. "I had weapons. I picked you up because you were cold." Kakashi's water prison collapsed as Zabuza's clone lost focus, and that was the moment Gato arrived. Because men like Gato always arrive at exactly the wrong time, with exactly the wrong plan. He came onto the bridge from the far end with 200 hired thugs behind him, tapping his cane, laughing that wet little laugh, and made a speech about how he had never intended to pay the demon of the hidden mist anyway, and how his men were going to kill everyone here and take turns with the boy in the mask. 200 men, swords, spears, hooks, axes. Naruto Uzumaki turned around and looked down the length of the bridge at them. "Kakashi-sensei," he said, "keep Tazuna behind you." Naruto. Blizzard burst. It came out of him in a single expanding front, a white wall of screaming wind and airborne ice moving down the bridge at the speed of a landslide. The thugs at the front got hit first and went off their feet. The ones behind them got hit by the men in front of them. And the ice came in behind the wind and took the whole formation at once. Arms, legs, weapons, all of it seizing solid in a rolling wave that swept 200 meters of stone bridge in under 3 seconds. When the wind died, there were 200 men frozen in place from the ankle to the waist, and not one of them was going anywhere. And the entire bridge deck had turned into a white sheet that glittered in the morning sun. Gato stood alone in the middle of it, his cane frozen to the ground, his tailored coat stiff with frost, and his mouth opening and closing. Naruto walked to him. "There is a code where I come from," he said. "It permits mercy for warriors. It says nothing about men who buy them. Wait, I'll pay you. I have. You starved this island for 4 years." Naruto's hand came up. "You do not get to negotiate." The freeze took Gato from the feet upward in one clean movement, and when it reached his throat, Naruto turned away, and the sound behind him was one long high crack, and then a collapse like a chandelier hitting a marble floor. Nobody on that bridge said a word for 10 full seconds. Then a boy's voice, small and shaking, came from the village end of the bridge. Inari, with a crossbow he could barely hold, standing at the front of maybe 40 villagers with pitchforks and kitchen knives and fishing hooks who had come to die for their home. He looked at the 200 frozen mercenaries. He looked at Naruto. "Are we late?" Inari asked. Sakura Haruno laughed so hard she sat down on the bridge and cried. They named it the Great Naruto Bridge over his objection, and Tazuna carved the Lin Kuei's mark into the keystone anyway, because the old man had decided that boy was going to be remembered whether he liked it or not. Zabuza Momochi and Haku left 3 days later, headed for the land of water and a rebellion that needed a demon on its side. At the tree line, Zabuza stopped and looked back at the kid in the blue tunic. "Hey, Ice Brat, Grandmaster." "Sure." Zabuza's visible eye narrowed. "You could have killed him. Everybody else in the world would have killed him. Why didn't you?" Naruto considered the question for a moment. "Because someone did it for me first," he said, "and the debt only clears if I pass it on." Zabuza grunted, hoisted his cleaver, and walked into the trees. Haku bowed, a real bow, low and long, and then ran to catch up, and he was smiling, and he had not done that in a very long time. The Chunin exams came 4 months later, and the second stage put Team 7 in the Forest of Death. And the Forest of Death put them in front of something the exams were never designed to contain. He came out of the trees wearing the skin of a grass nin, and he moved wrong, and Sakura noticed it half a second before it stopped mattering. Orochimaru of the Sannin took Sakura first. One strike, backhand, and she went into a tree trunk hard enough to crack it and slid down and did not get up. Sasuke's body locked. His Sharingan was active, which meant he saw everything in perfect clarity and could move for none of it. And the killing intent rolling off the Sannin was so thick that Sasuke was seeing his own death on repeat, a kunai going through his eye over and over. He would remember that paralysis for the rest of his life. He would also remember what happened next. Orochimaru turned his attention to the third one, the blonde in the mask. He extended the full weight of his intent. The pressure that had dropped Jonin to their knees, that had made an entire village of Chunin candidates soil themselves without a single technique being used. Naruto Uzumaki stood in it, the way a cliff stands in wind. His breathing did not change. His hands stayed at his sides. Frost began forming on the branch under his feet, spreading out in a slow white ring. Orochimaru's tongue flicked out, tasting the air. "Such unique chakra," he said, and his eyes were bright with the hunger of a man who collected people. "Cold. Foreign. There is something in you that does not belong to this world." Naruto answered him in 7 words. "You possess the stench of the NetherRealm, a foul, corrupted soul." Orochimaru laughed. It was a genuine laugh, delighted, the sound of a man who had found a new toy. And what would a child know of? Ice hammer! The air over Naruto's head condensed and compressed and became a 2-handed maul of glacial blue ice, 5 feet of head on a 4-foot haft, so heavy that the branch he stood on splintered. Orochimaru's smile faltered. He bit his thumb, and the summoning technique brought the swarm, 200 vipers pouring out of the ground and off the trees and out of his own sleeves. A living carpet of snakes flooding toward the boy from every angle. Naruto brought the hammer down. It hit the forest floor, and the shockwave went out flat, a white ring, expanding across the ground at the speed of sound, and it caught every snake in the swarm at once. 200 vipers froze in the postures they were moving in, coiled, striking, mid-lunge, mouths open. And the sound of 200 bodies flash freezing at the same instant was an enormous rolling crash, like a warehouse full of glass emptied off a cliff. They stood there, an entire army of blue sculptures pointing at their target, and then the shockwave's own vibration ran back through them, and they came apart. All of them. At once. In a spray of glittering blue shards that fell through the shafts of forest light and made the whole clearing look like it was snowing diamonds. Sasuke Uchiha, still frozen against his tree, made a sound that was not a word. Orochimaru stopped laughing. "I want you," the Sannin said. "Forget the Uchiha, I want you." Then he opened his mouth and the Kusanagi came out of his throat, and he crossed 30 feet of forest floor in a blink and drove the blade straight through Naruto Uzumaki's chest. The sword punched out the other side. The tip buried in a tree. Orochimaru's face split into a grin of triumph. The body on the end of his sword turned solid blue from the wound outward. Ice clone. The frost went up the kusanagi like fire on a fuse. It hit the hilt, it hit his hand, and it kept going. Orochimaru wrenched backward, and the clone came apart in a burst of freezing vapor that swallowed the clearing in white, and through that white, from 30 feet straight up, from a hole in the canopy nobody had seen him make, came Naruto Uzumaki in a dead vertical fall, with both hands closing around a shaft of ice that was still forming as he dropped. The Kori blade finished assembling 6 inches before impact. It went through Orochimaru's right shoulder, front to back, angled down, and it did not stop there. Naruto's full falling weight drove the blade another 2 feet into the trunk of the ancient oak behind him, and the Sannin was pinned to it like a specimen on a board. The ice buried to the crossguard in old wood. Orochimaru screamed. He was one of the strongest people alive. He had modified his body past the point of ordinary pain. He screamed anyway, because the blade was not cutting him, it was taking him. The cold went out from the wound and into the muscle and into the nerves and into the chakra network itself, and every one of those systems began to die in the order the cold reached them. Naruto planted a foot on the tree trunk, leaned in until his masked face was inches from the Sannin's ear, and delivered the verdict. Feel the chill of despair. Frost bloomed across Orochimaru's collarbone, up the side of his neck, down the length of his right arm to the fingertips. The Sannin's mind, which was the fastest and most terrible thing about him, ran the options in under a second. Rip free of the blade. Lose the shoulder, lose the arm, lose the nerves permanently. Stay, lose everything, shed the body. He chose the third, and it was not really a choice. Orochimaru's jaw unhinged and a pale form dragged itself up and out of the ruined host, splitting the skin, and it hit the forest floor already running, and there was no grace in it at all. The new body's right arm hung limp and gray from the shoulder down. The cryomancy damage carried straight through the transfer. Nerve tissue killed at a depth that no medical technique on this continent could undo. He got 20 meters before he looked back. Naruto Uzumaki was pulling the Kori blade out of the oak with one hand. He did not chase. He did not gloat. He looked at the fleeing Sannin the way a man looks at a rat leaving a kitchen. "Come back when you are healed," Naruto said. "I will do the other arm." Orochimaru of the Sannin, one of the 3 most feared shinobi in the world, ran. He would spend the next 2 years telling absolutely nobody what had happened in that forest, because he had no vocabulary for it, and because saying it out loud would have made it real. Sasuke Uchiha sat down in the middle of a clearing full of frozen snake fragments and could not stop shaking. Naruto crossed to Sakura first, checked her pulse, checked her spine, then eased her onto her side and set a thin sheet of ice against the swelling at the back of her skull. "Concussion," he said. "She will wake within the hour." Sasuke's voice cracked. "That was Orochimaru. That was one of the Sannin. Yes, you put him through a tree. Through his shoulder, into the tree." Naruto stood and dropped the blade, which vaporized before it hit the ground. The distinction matters. Aim for the joint, and you take a man's career. Aim for the heart, and you take a man's death, and death is cheap. He will spend the rest of his life reaching for something with an arm that will never answer him. Sasuke stared up at the boy his own age standing over him. And the thing he felt, the thing that would sit in his chest and rot for the next several months, was not admiration. It was the black, airless understanding that he had stood there, with the eyes of his clan open in his skull, and done absolutely nothing. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sasuke asked. "In the academy, on the bridge, you never showed me any of this. You let me think I was close to you." Naruto looked at him for a long moment. "I never let you think anything," he said. "You did that yourself." He turned toward the tower. "Bring Sakura. We have 3 days and I want to be there in 1. They arrived in 7 hours. Anko Mitarashi read the survivor report from the Forest of Death, put it down, picked it up, read it again, went outside, and threw up in a bush. The preliminary rounds ran in an underground arena with a balcony full of Jonin Sensei and a scoreboard that flickered. Naruto drew Dosu Kinuta of the Hidden Sound. Dosu was not a joke. He had put grown men on the floor with a technique they could not block, could not dodge, and could not see. The melody arm on his right hand amplified sound into resonance frequencies that turned a human inner ear into soup, and there was no defense against it because you cannot armor the inside of your own head. He had watched the Ice Boy all week. He had seen what the reports said. He had a plan. "You freeze water," Dosu said, walking to the center of the floor. "You freeze fire. You freeze people. I've heard all of it." He raised the gauntlet. "You can freeze fire and water. You cannot freeze sound." Up in the balcony, Kakashi Hatake started to smile behind his mask. Naruto did not move into a stance. He stood there with his hands loose at his sides and gave an answer that shut the entire arena up. "Sound travels through the air," he said, "and I control what is in the air." Dosu fired. He drove the full output of the melody arm forward, a cone of amplified resonance that would liquefy the balance of anyone inside it. And he was good. He angled it to catch the walls and bounce, closing every escape lane in a single move. Naruto exhaled. He put out a long, slow breath of supercooled air into the path of that blast, and every particle of moisture in that cone froze into a suspended cloud of microscopic ice crystals, millions of them hanging in the air, each one a tiny obstacle. The sound wave hit it and disintegrated. You could see it happen. The resonance front hit the crystal field like a wave hitting a sandbar. It fractured, scattered off a billion surfaces, lost coherence in 1.5 meters, and died completely before it made it halfway across the floor. Dosu's one visible eye went very wide. Ice slide. 30 feet of arena floor turned to glass, and Naruto came down that lane in less than a second, low, one hand trailing, and he came up under Dosu's guard with his whole body behind an uppercut. The fist hit the melody arm. The gauntlet's outer casing crumpled. The resonating chamber inside, the delicate machinery that made the whole technique possible, took a shock of absolute zero at the exact moment it took several hundred pounds of force, and it burst apart inside its own housing with a metallic scream. Dosu left the ground. He went up and back, 20 feet of air, and hit the ceiling hard enough that a chunk of stone came loose and fell with him. He landed on the arena floor and did not get up, and the wreckage of his gauntlet landed 6 feet away in pieces. Hayate Gecko coughed. Winner, Naruto Uzumaki. 3 full seconds of total silence. Then the arena lost its mind. Kiba Inuzuka was shouting something incoherent. Ino had both hands over her mouth. Shikamaru had actually opened his eyes all the way, which his own father noted as a historic event. Gaara of the Sand, standing alone with his arms crossed, was staring down at the boy in the blue tunic with an expression that had never appeared on his face before, and the sand in his gourd was moving on its own. Up on the balcony, Kakashi said to nobody in particular, "He beat sound with breathing." "He beat sound with humidity," Asuma corrected, lighting a cigarette with a hand that was not entirely steady. Kurenai Yuhi looked at both of them. "You realize that boy is 12. We are all trying very hard not to realize that," said Asuma. The finals came a month later, and the stadium was packed to the rafters. Daimyo, feudal lords, the Kazekage, foreign dignitaries, and about 12,000 civilians who had bought tickets on the strength of a rumor. First match, Naruto Uzumaki versus Neji Hyuga. Neji had spent the preliminaries breaking his own cousin's ribs while explaining to her that fate had assigned her a role, and she should have the decency to lie in it. He had a worldview, and it was airtight, and it had been built out of a dead father and a curse seal on his forehead, and 100 small humiliations that stacked into a wall. He walked to the center of the arena with his Byakugan already active. "You cannot win," Neji said. "I have seen your chakra network. It is enormous, and it is still a network. 64 points. Every technique you have ever used passes through them. Fate has already decided this match." Naruto took his stance, feet set, hands open, weight even. "Then close them," he said. Neji did. "The 8 trigram 64 palms is a beautiful, awful technique. 2 strikes, 4 strikes, 8, 16, 32, 64. Each one a needle of chakra driven into a tenketsu point, sealing it, shutting the network down node by node until the target's chakra has nowhere to go. Neji hit every single one. The crowd was on its feet by the 32nd strike. By the 64th, half the stadium had already decided the match was over, and Neji stepped back into a finishing stance with the calm of a man reading the end of a book he had written himself. Naruto was still standing. more than standing. His breathing was even. His hands were up. Neiji's Byakugan strained. He looked at the network he had just closed and saw the reason, and the reason made no sense to him at all. Every one of those 64 points had a thin sheath of frost around it. Not on the skin, inside. Naruto had laid the frost armor along the interior of his own chakra pathways before the match started. A hairline layer of ice insulating every node, and Neiji's chakra needles had gone into that ice and stopped there. The freeze had absorbed all 64. Neiji's voice failed him. That is impossible. You cannot armor a tenketsu, the chakra would. Naruto caught his wrist on the final palm. He held it, and the temperature around the two of them fell. And when he spoke, it was low enough that the microphones on the arena floor caught it, and the whole stadium heard. You claim fate controls us, Naruto said. I was once a slave to my clan's corruption. My own brother built a machine to strip the soul out of every man in our order, and I was next in line. I was told what I was and who I served and how I would die. His grip tightened. I froze that destiny and I broke it apart with my hands. Do not lecture me about cages, Hyuga. I have lived in better ones than yours. Neji ripped his wrist free and spun into the rotation. The Hyuga's absolute defense, a sphere of expelled chakra that repels everything. It requires one thing above all others. It requires you to spin. Ground ice. The arena floor went white in one heartbeat, and Neiji's feet locked at the ankle mid-rotation, and the technique tore itself apart against its own anchored base. He staggered, off-axis, arms flailing, and for the first time in the entire match, the perfect Hyuga genius looked like a boy who had lost his footing. Naruto stepped in and hit him once. Open palm, center chest, straight through. The impact carried a pulse of cryomancy that spread out across Neiji's shirt in a white starburst, and Neji Hyuga left the ground, flew 18 feet and hit the arena wall. He slid down it and sat there in the dirt. The stadium was so silent you could hear the flags. In the clan section, Hiyashi Hyuga was standing. He had risen at some point during the 64 palms and had not sat down. Behind him, Hinata had both hands pressed against her mouth. Beside her, 3 elders of the Hyuga main house were staring at the arena floor where the branch house prodigy, the one they had all agreed was the strongest Hyuga of his generation, was sitting in a spreading puddle of meltwater. Neji looked down at the ice on his chest. It was already thawing, running down his shirt in cold rivulets, and he thought about a boy who had chosen mercy for the second time in 4 minutes. And he thought about a father who had walked to his own execution and had, his uncle had once said, chosen it. Chosen it. Neji Hyuga started crying in front of 12,000 people and did not have the first idea how to stop. Naruto crouched in front of him and held out a hand. Your father was a free man, he said. The seal never touched that part of him, and he passed it to you. He waited. Get up. Fate is a thing you make. Neji took the hand, and then the stadium came apart with noise, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, Hiyashi Hyuga sat down slowly and put his face in one hand and thought about his brother for the first time in 11 years. The feathers started falling 9 minutes later. Genjutsu, seeded through the crowd, the standard opening for a coordinated attack designed to put the civilians and the low-ranked shinobi to sleep so the invaders could work uninterrupted. Naruto broke it with a pulse of cold before the first feather touched his shoulder. In the Kage box, the Kazekage's hands moved, and Hiruzen Sarutobi was suddenly gone from view behind a purple barrier on the roof, and the face under that hat turned out to belong to a man with a dead right arm and a very long grudge. And in the middle of the arena, a boy with red hair and no eyebrows began to scream. Gaara of the Sand had been waiting for this all month. He had watched Naruto put down Dosu and Neji, and something inside him, the thing that whispered at night and asked to be fed, had decided that this one, would finally prove that Gaara existed. The sand came out of the gourd and it kept coming. It took the arena wall. It took the stands. It rose 4 stories, then 6, then 8, forming legs and a torso, and 2 enormous arms and a head, with a black and yellow eye and a jaw full of stone teeth. And when it finished, it opened that jaw and roared. And the sound cracked windows 6 blocks away and knocked 300 people flat. Shukaku, the one tail. A demon that had swallowed entire caravans in the desert and left nothing but a depression in the dunes. Konoha's defense collapsed instantly. 2 Jonin squads hit it with fire techniques and the sand ate them. A wind technique from the roof of the medical wing bought 4 seconds. An entire Anbu platoon deployed. Within a minute, half of them were down and the other half were pulling them out. Because here is the truth of a tailed beast. It is not a stronger enemy. It is a different category of thing. You do not fight it. You survive it, and you evacuate and you pray. Every shinobi in that district understood that in their bones. And then one figure walked out into the open, alone, into the middle of the crushed arena floor, and stopped in front of a 3-story monster made of compressed sand. The whole battlefield saw him do it. Kakashi, mid-fight on a rooftop, saw it. Guy holding a gate saw it. Jiraiya of the Sannin, who had just arrived on the western wall and was about to summon a toad the size of a house, saw it and stopped with his hand on his thumb. Naruto Uzumaki looked up at Shukaku, and his voice carried across the entire ruined stadium. A beast of sand against the Grandmaster of ice. Shukaku's laugh rolled out like a rock slide. "What are you going to do, little man?" The beast's chest expanded. It compressed air in its belly and fired. The wind bullet, a sphere of hyper-compressed atmosphere, launched with the force of a cannon shell, the kind of attack that had leveled fortifications. It came in at a speed that would have punched a hole through 3 city blocks. Naruto raised both hands. Deep freeze. A beam left his palms, not white, not blue, but a pale, terrible color that had no name, a solid line of concentrated cryomantic energy that hit the incoming wind bullet dead center at the midpoint of its flight. The compressed air inside that sphere froze. All of it. Instantly. A mass of condensed atmosphere the size of a house went from a weapon to a solid block of ice in the space between 2 heartbeats. And the momentum that had been driving it forward was suddenly attached to something with weight, and the whole thing lost its trajectory and dropped, tumbling, sailing over the arena wall to crash into the tree line beyond and take out 400 meters of forest, frozen, midair. A tailed beast's attack. 12,000 people made no sound at all. On the western wall, Jiraiya of the Sannin said, "You have got to be kidding me." "What?" Shikaku's eye had gone wide. "What did you do to it? What did you—" "Ice slide." Naruto hit the ground and the ground turned to a runway, and he shot forward at the beast's foot and did not stop there. The ice went up. He froze a path along the sand demon's leg and rode it vertically, accelerating, a blue streak climbing 3 stories of living monster in under 2 seconds. The sand tried to close over him. It hit the cold and stiffened. At the shoulder, Naruto came off the slide airborne and both hands filled. Ice axes. Twin short axes formed out of nothing, heads thick and heavy, and he drove them both into Shukaku's upper chest to the haft and hung there, anchored to the side of a demon. Shukaku thrashed. It clawed at its own shoulder. It threw its head back and howled loud enough to blow out every remaining window in the stadium. Naruto planted his feet against the sand, took a breath, and let the entire battlefield hear the thing he said next. "For the Lin Kuei!" And he opened the floodgate. Absolute zero. The temperature did something the elemental nations had never recorded. It came out of him in a hemisphere, and it went into the sand. And this is the part that Sand Village records would argue about for a decade. Because Shukaku's body was not really sand, it was chakra, given form, using sand as a lattice. Cold that severe does 2 things to that. It kills the moisture that lets the grains cohere, and it slows the chakra flow itself until the lattice has nothing holding it together. The demon's arm went rigid first, then the shoulder, then the chest, in a spreading white bloom radiating out from 2 ice axes, running down the torso and up the neck, sealing the jaw mid-roar. Frost climbed a 3-story monster like ivy on a wall. 8 seconds later, Shukaku was a statue. Naruto ripped the axes free, climbed to the crown of the frozen skull, and drove one fist into it. The ice above Gaara's body burst apart, and Naruto reached in with both hands, took the unconscious boy by the shoulders, and pulled. Gaara came free. And the moment his body left it, the entire construct lost everything holding it up. 3 stories of frozen-tailed beast came apart from the top down. A slow, enormous collapse of blue and white, and the sound was the loudest thing anyone in that stadium had ever heard. A roar of breaking ice that went on for 11 straight seconds, like an entire glacier calving into the sea. Chunks the size of houses hitting the arena floor and bursting into powder. Naruto landed on a rooftop with Gaara over one shoulder, in a cloud of falling white, as the demon of the desert came down in pieces behind him. 40 seconds, start to finish. Nobody moved on that battlefield. Not the sand shinobi who had been screaming and charging 30 seconds ago. Not the sound squad on the eastern wall. Not the Konoha Jonin who had already made peace with dying today. Then somebody in the stands started clapping, and it caught, and 12,000 terrified civilians who had just watched a 12-year-old freeze a demon out of the sky made a noise that the Anbu on the north wall said they could feel in the stone. Tamari of the Sand dropped her fan and did not pick it up. Kankuro said out loud, "We're going home. Whatever happens, we're going home. I'm telling Baki right now, we are going home." Jiraiya of the Sannin sat down on the western wall, with his legs hanging over the side, and started laughing, a big helpless belly laugh, wiping his eye with his thumb. "Minato," he said to the sky. "Minato, have you seen this?" Naruto laid Gaara down on the rooftop tiles. The boy's face in unconsciousness was young and drawn and streaked with old tear tracks, and there was a kanji carved into his forehead that meant love, which was the single most brutal thing Naruto had seen in this world so far. He crouched there in the middle of a war and looked at him for a moment. Kuei Liang had known what it was to be forged into something by other people's hands, to be sharpened, aimed, and fired. To wake up one day and realize that everything you thought you were had been designed by someone who did not love you. "You were made into a blade," Naruto said, to a boy who could not hear him. "The blade is not the problem. Blades can be reforged. I have done it." He set 2 fingers against Gaara's forehead and pushed the smallest amount of cold into the seal, enough to steady it, enough to stop the leak. Gaara's breathing evened out for the first time in 12 years. Then Naruto stood up and turned toward the Hokage Tower, where a purple barrier was burning against the sky. Hiruzen Sarutobi was losing. He was 69 years old, and he was fighting Orochimaru, and the reanimation had put the first and second Hokage on the roof against him, and he had already made the decision in his heart to use the Reaper Death Seal and take his student with him. He had it half formed when the barrier's northern wall turned white. Frost climbed the purple energy from the outside, the moisture in the air on the far side, crystallizing, thickening, layering over the barrier like ice on a window in a storm. Then the Sound 4's northern anchor screamed as his hands froze to his own barrier tag, and the wall failed, and a boy stepped through the gap. Orochimaru turned. The recognition took a quarter of a second, and then every part of the Sannin's body remembered the forest at the same time. His dead right arm, the one hanging useless at his side, the one that had cost him a host body and 2 years of research, began to ache, phantom cold running down from the shoulder to the fingers he could no longer feel. "No," Orochimaru said. "Lord Third." Naruto's voice was even. "Release the seal. You will not be needing it." Hiruzen dropped his hands, and the Reaper Death Seal went unfinished, and the old man felt about 30 years fall off his shoulders. Orochimaru sent the reanimated Hokage forward, because that was all he had. Naruto met the first and second Hokage of Konoha in the middle of the roof, and, for the record, he did not defeat them. Nobody defeats reanimated Kage in 20 seconds. What he did was stop them, which was somehow worse to watch. Ground ice. The roof glazed and both bodies caught at the ankle. Blizzard burst. The wind hit them and packed the ice up their legs to the waist, then the chest, layer on layer, faster than the reanimation's regeneration could push through it, until the first Hokage of the Leaf was standing in a column of blue ice with his arms pinned and an expression on his dead face that looked, to Hiruzen, almost like amusement. Then Naruto turned around and started walking toward Orochimaru. The Sannin looked at his own frozen weapons. He looked at his ruined arm. He looked at the boy crossing the roof toward him at an unhurried pace, and the temperature dropping with every step, and frost racing across the tiles ahead of him in a spreading white tide. And Orochimaru of the Sannin, for the second time in 2 years, ran. He dropped the reanimations, tore the barrier down, and went off the north side of the tower with the Sound Force scrambling after him. And Kabuto Yakushi's evacuation order went out to every sound squad in the village within the minute. The invasion of Konoha lasted 11 more minutes, and then it was over. Hiruzen Sarutobi sat down on the tower roof in his battle armor with the ash of a dead man's technique still on his hands, and looked at the boys standing at the edge of the roof watching the sand forces withdraw. "I was going to die today," the old man said. "I know." "You knew?" "You had already decided. It was in your posture." Naruto did not turn around. "I have seen men make that decision. There is a way the shoulders sit." Hiruzen laughed, and it turned into a cough, and then into something else entirely, and the third Hokage of the Hidden Leaf sat on his own roof and wept in front of a child who let him do it without comment. Because Kuai Liang had learned somewhere in a mountain temple a long time ago that the kindest thing you can do for a warrior in that moment is to stand there and say nothing. 261 people died in the invasion of Konoha. In the timeline where the boy in the isolation cell broke instead of waking up, that number was 4,000, and the third Hokage was one of them. The village called him the Frost Grandmaster after that. He hated it, said so once, and gave up when the merchants started printing it on cups. 2 weeks later, 2 men in black cloaks with red clouds walked into a tea house on the eastern edge of the village. Kakashi found them first and lost that engagement in about 90 seconds, trapped in a genjutsu that had him hanging on a cross for 3 days in the space of 1 second. And it was Might Guy's flying kick that got him out of it, which is how Itachi Uchiha and Kisame Hoshigaki came to be standing in a flooded street at dusk, facing a 12-year-old in a blue tunic and a black mask. "Naruto Uzumaki," Itachi said, "you will come with us." Kisame grinned around too many teeth and pulled Samehada off his back. "Let me get the legs, Itachi. He'll travel fine without them." Naruto looked at the two of them and made an assessment out loud, which he rarely did. The shark uses a sword that eats chakra. The Uchiha uses his eyes. He rolled his shoulder. "Neither of those works on me. Choose whether you want to learn that slowly or all at once." Kisame chose all at once. He went through 6 hand seals and brought the river up, the water shark bomb, a rolling wall of pressurized water shaped into a shark's head coming down the street at building height. Naruto put one hand out, deep freeze. The beam hit the base of the wave, and the entire technique froze from the bottom up in a single spreading crackle, and 40 tons of water became 40 tons of ice sculpture and came down on the street with a crash that broke the pavement, and Kisame Hoshigaki had to sprint sideways to avoid being crushed by his own attack. He landed on a roof. He looked at the frozen shark. "Okay," said Kisame, "that's new." Itachi's Sharingan spun. Tsukuyomi. The world went red and black. Naruto found himself bound to a cross in a landscape of blood-colored sky and endless flat ground, with Itachi Uchiha standing before him holding a blade, in a place where 3 days would pass in a single second. "For the next 72 hours, Itachi began, you will be." Naruto laughed. It was the first time anyone in this life had heard the sound. It was short and low, and it had no humor in it whatsoever, and Itachi Uchiha, the calmest man in the Akatsuki, felt the hair on his arm stand up. "Do you know where I have been?" Naruto asked. He looked around the red world with something close to boredom. "I was a slave in the NetherRealm. I was a corpse with a mind still inside it, and my master was a fallen god, and I served him for years while my soul watched from behind my own eyes and could not close them." He met Itachi's gaze. "You have built me a room and threatened to keep me in it for 3 days. I lived in a worse one for longer than you have been alive, and the difference is that yours has a door." The frost started at his wrists. It went up the cross. It went out across the ground. It hit the red sky and climbed it, and Itachi Uchiha watched his own mental construct, his absolute technique, the one that had never failed, freeze over from the inside like a lake in November, and then he watched the entire thing come apart in a rain of red and black shards. Reality came back. Itachi staggered. Blood ran from his right eye and down his cheek, and it kept running. "Impossible," he said. "Improbable," Naruto corrected, already moving. "Ice slide." He crossed the flooded street in a blink, came up out of it with the Kori blade forming as he rose, and Itachi Uchiha had to use a full-body substitution and 2 flame techniques to buy the 6 feet of distance he needed to survive it. The Kori blade went through the wall of the tea house behind him and out the other side. Kasame looked at the hole. Kasame looked at Itachi's bleeding eye. Kasame, who had spent his entire adult life being the scariest thing in whatever room he entered, made a professional judgment. "Itachi," he said, "we're leaving." "Yes." They went, and they went fast, and neither of them spoke for 2 hours. 900 meters away on a rooftop, Sasuke Uchiha stood with his hands shaking at his sides, having arrived just in time to see the last 40 seconds. He had come running to fight his brother. Instead, he had watched somebody else break Itachi Uchiha's eye and make him run. And that was the exact moment Sasuke Uchiha broke. Kabuto Yakushi found him 19 days later. He did not need to work hard. He offered a mark on the neck and a road out. And Sasuke, who had spent 5 years believing he was the protagonist of a revenge story and had just watched somebody else casually do the thing he had built his life around, took it. The seal Kabuto brought was prepared in advance, in a sealed scroll, in Orochimaru's own hand. It went onto Sasuke's neck at 2 a.m. in a training ground 3 kilometers north of the village, and it burned for 6 hours. And when the pain stopped, Sasuke Uchiha felt strong for the first time since he was 7 years old. He went north. Shikamaru's retrieval squad never assembled because the alarm went out at 3:40 a.m. And by 3:44 a.m., there was already a trail of frost heading north out of the village gate at a speed the gate guards described as a blue line. Naruto caught him at the Valley of the End. Rain. Hard, flat, cold rain coming down in sheets, hammering the surface of the river and drumming on the 2 enormous stone faces set into the cliffs on either side. Madara Uchiha on the left, Hashirama Senju on the right. 2 men who had loved each other and torn a continent in half over the question of how the world should work, carved 100 feet tall in rock, staring at each other forever over a waterfall. Sasuke Uchiha stood on Madara's hand. Naruto Uzumaki stood on Hashirama's. The curse mark was already spreading. Black lines crawled out from Sasuke's neck and across his cheek and down his arm, and his skin was darkening, and his hair was growing. And his eyes had gone the color of an old bruise. He laughed, and the sound came out wrong, doubled, like there was something else breathing underneath it. "You came." Sasuke spread his arms. "Of course you came. The perfect one. The one who never struggles. The one who beat Orochimaru at 12 and made my brother run." His voice cracked open. "Do you know what it's like? Do you have any idea what it's like to spend your whole life sharpening a knife and then find out somebody else was born holding a sword?" "Yes," said Naruto. "Don't." His name was Bihan. He was my brother, and he was stronger than me and better than me, and he told me so every day of my childhood. Naruto's voice carried over the rain. "He became a monster. I had to put him down. Do not tell me about standing in a shadow, Sasuke." "You cannot stop me, Naruto." Sasuke's hand went to his neck, and the level 2 transformation began. The webbing spreading across his face, the wings tearing out of his back, the whole thing steaming in the rain. "I am an Avenger. You do not know what it is to walk in the darkness." Naruto looked up at him, and the glacial blue started in his eyes, and it did not stop at his eyes. It came out through his skin, a faint aura hanging in the air around him, and the rain in a 10-meter circle around Naruto Uzumaki turned to falling snow. When he spoke, there was no anger in it. There was something much heavier. "I have been to hell and back, Sasuke. I have worn the mantle of a revenant. You embraced the darkness like a child playing with fire. I have walked out of it." Sasuke screamed and came off the cliff face. He came down with his hand full of black lightning. The Chidori, corrupted by the curse-marked chakra into something that hissed instead of chirped, dragging a tail of dark current behind it, splitting the rain apart for 30 feet in every direction. The smell of ozone came ahead of it, and under the ozone was something rotten. The Black Chidori. Enough raw energy to punch through a boulder and everything behind it. Naruto ran up the cliff to meet him. He did not dodge. He did not counter with a technique at range. He brought his right hand back and let the moisture in the air pour into it, layer over layer, compressing, packing, until his fist was buried inside a gauntlet of ice so dense it had gone almost black at the knuckles. They met halfway down the cliff face, over the water. Black lightning hit absolute zero, and the Chidori did not explode. It froze. Everything that made that technique work, the heat, the motion, the current tearing through the air, hit a temperature with no bottom to it, and it stopped. The lightning solidified in place. It kept its shape. Every branching arc of black current crystallized into a jagged sculpture of ice-locked electricity around Sasuke's hand and forearm, glittering in the rain, holding perfectly still. It stayed like that for 2 full seconds. Sasuke stared at his own arm, encased in a frozen storm, and made a small sound. Then the whole thing crumbled and fell, and the pieces hit the water below and hissed. Naruto stepped inside his guard. They landed together on the surface of the river, and the water under Naruto's feet froze outward in a spreading white disk, and the waterfall behind them began to seize from the top down with a groan of cracking ice that echoed off both cliff walls. Sasuke swung at him. Naruto caught the wrist. Sasuke swung with the other hand. Naruto caught that too. The transformation was screaming, the wings beating, the cursed chakra pouring off him in black steam, and none of it moved the boy holding him by both wrists. Naruto looked at him, at the face of a friend he had shared a bento with, at the boy who had frozen up in the forest of death and had spent every day since hating himself for it, at somebody who had lost everything in one night and had been handed a knife instead of a hand. He was calm. He was absolute. I am Sub-Zero, Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei, and you are bested. He let go of one wrist and drove an open palm into the center of Sasuke's chest. There was no killing force behind it. That was the point. The cryomancy went through the impact and into Sasuke's chakra network, and it followed the cursed chakra back along its own pathways, up the arm, across the shoulder, into the neck, straight to the source. And when it reached the heaven seal, it did not break it or burn it out or tear it loose. It froze it. The 3 tomoi locked under a layer of ice pressed into the skin. The black line stopped spreading, hesitated, and then began pulling back, retreating along Sasuke's arm and his face and his throat like a tide going out, sucked back to the mark and sealed there under blue. Orochimaru's presence, that whisper that had been in Sasuke's ear for 19 days, promising, wheedling, feeding, went silent, not weakened, gone, like a candle in a vacuum. Sasuke Uchiha's transformation collapsed. The wings came apart into black vapor. His skin went back to its own color. His hair fell back to its own length, and his eyes rolled up and he dropped, backward, into the freezing river. The water caught him and closed around him in an inch of ice, and he lay there, held up on the surface, unconscious, breathing, the curse mark on his neck, dull and blue and inert. Naruto stood over him with the rain coming down. The waterfall at the Valley of the End froze solid that night. It happened from the crest down, 140 feet of falling water seizing in place in a column of blue-white ice, and it made a sound as it locked that they heard in a village 9 kilometers away and mistook for thunder. Frost climbed the cliff faces. It went up Madara Uchiha's carved shoulder and across Hashirama Senju's stone jaw, a white lattice spreading over 2 dead men who had killed each other's dreams over this river. It reached the tops of both heads and kept going. In a 10-meter circle around Naruto Uzumaki, the rain came down as snow. He stood there with his hands at his sides and his breath fogging out of his mask, and he did not look triumphant, because there was nothing here to feel triumphant about. He had just carried an unconscious friend out of a hole he had dug for himself, and there would be a long road after this, and Naruto knew exactly how long that road was, because he had walked it himself with a spear-wielding ghost who should have hated him. Behind him, Sasuke Uchiha lay on a sheet of river ice, and his chest rose and fell, and the mark on his neck had gone dead under a layer of blue. Naruto Uzumaki looked out at the frozen valley, at the stopped waterfall, at the 2 stone giants wearing frost-like crowns, at the snow falling in a ring of stillness around the Grandmaster of the Lin Kuei. 2 clans went to war here, he said, to nobody, or maybe to a mountain temple 1,000 years in a world away. I rebuilt mine. The words went out across the ice and came back off both cliff faces, and then the valley held still. Kakashi Hatake arrived 40 minutes later with Pakun at his heel. and he came over the ridge at a dead sprint expecting a corpse. What he found was 140 feet of waterfall standing straight up in the air like a column somebody had hammered into the earth. Frost on Madara's stone jaw, frost on Hashirama's stone brow, snow falling in a ring in the middle of a rainstorm, and inside that ring, a boy in a blue tunic with an unconscious Uchiha over one shoulder, walking toward him at the pace of a man leaving work. Kakashi stopped on the ridge. He looked at the waterfall. He looked at the students he had been assigned 3 years ago. "Is he alive?" Kakashi managed. "He is breathing and his spine is intact," Naruto said. "The seal is inert. Get a stretcher team out here. I will carry him until they arrive, but I would rather he woke up flat than folded." Pakken sniffed the air once and pressed himself against Kakashi's ankle and refused to move any closer. The Konoha Hospital's 2 senior SEAL specialists spent the following week with their heads bent over Sasuke Uchiha's neck. And at the end of it, they filed a report to the Hokage's desk with a question mark drawn on the cover in red ink, which is the sort of thing you do when you have exhausted every professional option and have arrived at honesty. The heaven seal was still there. Every line of it, every tomoe, all 3, perfectly preserved under a film of ice that had been pressed into the skin and had refused to melt for 6 days in a heated room. The specialists could read the seal. They could trace its structure. What they could no longer find was the other end of it. That was the part that put the question mark on the cover. A cursed seal of that grade is a 2-way road. Orochimaru wrote them so he could listen through them, feed through them, and one day walk through them. The road out of Sasuke's neck ended 11 millimeters in, at a wall of blue, and past that wall, the specialists registered exactly the same thing they would have registered in a stone. Their conclusion, written in the driest language 2 exhausted medics could produce. The connection has ended rather than been suppressed. We have no framework for the mechanism. We recommend against attempting to reverse it. Tsunade Senju read the report twice, put it down, and looked out the window of an office she had been sitting in for 11 months. Hiruzen Sarutobi had handed her the hat 3 weeks after the invasion. He had done it in front of the council, and he had done it without a speech. And afterward, in private, he had told Jiraiya exactly one thing about why. That a boy had walked onto a rooftop and taken a death he had already accepted out of his hands, and that a man who has been given back the end of his own life owes it to somebody to spend it somewhere other than a chair. Sasuke Uchiha woke up on the 3rd day. The ceiling of a Konoha hospital room is white plaster with a water stain in the corner shaped like a dog. He looked at it for about 90 seconds before he understood 2 things at the same time. The first was that his neck was cold. The second was that it did not hurt. For 19 days the mark had been a coal under his skin, and before that, for a month, it had been an itch, and before that, for 5 years, there had been a different burn in the same general area of his chest that he had learned to call purpose because he had nothing else to call it. All of it was gone. He lay in a bed with clean sheets and a window open on a spring afternoon and could feel his own heartbeat, and there was nothing riding on it. Naruto was sitting in the chair by the wall with his mask down around his throat, eating an apple. "You are awake," he said. "Drink the water on your left before you talk. Your throat will fail on the second sentence otherwise." Sasuke drank the water. His throat failed on the second sentence anyway. "Where?" He coughed. "The mark." "Sealed. Orochimaru's line into you has ended." Naruto set the apple core on the windowsill. "He will feel the loss for the rest of his life. I intend to make that a short period." Sasuke stared at his own hands on the blanket. They were his hands, ordinary, uncursed, with a hospital band around the left wrist. And then it came up out of him all at once, the thing he had never once said out loud in 5 years, and it came out in a voice that had cracked somewhere between the valley and the bed. "Then what am I?" Naruto looked at him. "I have been an Avenger since I was 7 years old," Sasuke said. "That is the whole thing. That is the entire shape of me. I get up, I train, I get stronger, I kill him, and then..." He stopped. There was never a then. I never built one. I did not need one. His hands closed on the blanket. And you took Orochimaru's leash off me, and you broke my brother's eye in front of me, and you froze the strongest thing I have ever felt in my life out of the sky. And I stood on a roof and watched, and now the mark is dead, and my head is silent, and I do not know what I'm supposed to be. Understand what is happening in that room. This is the confession that Sasuke Uchiha never makes. In the version of this world where a 6-year-old broke in a freezer instead of waking up in one, this conversation happens years later on a battlefield with both of them missing an arm. Here it happens at 3 in the afternoon in a hospital bed with a spring wind coming through the window, and there is a boy in the chair who has actually been through it. Naruto stood up. He did that thing he does where he does not come closer to make a point. He just gets his weight under him. The identity you had was a splint, he said. You broke something at 7 and somebody handed you a straight piece of wood and told you to strap it on and walk. It worked. You walked. He nodded at the bandaged neck. The bone is set, the splint came off, and you are lying there feeling the arm and finding it strange because you have never used it for anything except carrying a splint. That's not. It is exactly that. Naruto crossed to the door. The road forward exists. I know it exists because I built one, and I built it out of nothing better than what you have on that bed. There is a way through this, and it is made entirely of work, not insight, not a moment of clarity in the rain. Work every day in the dull part of the morning when nobody is watching you do it. He put his hand on the frame. Get up when they let you. Come to my ground at dawn. Bring water. He left. Sasuke Uchiha lay in the bed and looked at the water stain shaped like a dog, and he found that he could keep looking at it for as long as he wanted without anything in his skull burning. He did that for 2 hours, 2.5 years. Jiraiya of the Sannin came to the Hokage's office in the 2nd week of that spring with a proposal about taking the Jinchuriki out of the village for a training tour, and he came in with the whole pitch prepared. The seal work, the toads, the Uzumaki chakra reserves, the sage arts down the line. Tsunade let him get to the end of it. Then she slid the seal specialist report across the desk. Jiraiya read it. He read it again. He set it down and rubbed his jaw and looked at his old teammate's replacement. Okay, he said. So what am I actually going to be doing out there? He found out inside a month. Here is the honest account of Naruto Uzumaki's training trip, which is the strangest apprenticeship in the recorded history of the shinobi world. Because for most of it, the master was the one taking notes. Jiraiya taught. He was genuinely good at it, and he had a lot to give. Sealing theory. Naruto took to it the way a man takes to a language he already dreams in, because the Lin Kuei had kept scrolls for 1,000 years, and Kuai Liang had read all of them. Chakra control drills. Nature transformation, which turned out to be nearly redundant and yet worth knowing anyway. Infiltration. How to run a network. How to talk to a border guard so he forgets your face on purpose. Field medicine. How to disappear in a city. Naruto absorbed all of it without complaint and without praise, and he practiced everything until it was clean. And then he went out into the hills alone after dark and worked on the thing Jiraiya could not touch. The cryomancy in the boy's first life had run on a bloodline and a soul. In this one, it ran on a chakra system like a delta and a 9-tailed engine sitting in the reservoir. And the ceiling of it had never been found because nobody had ever pushed the throttle all the way forward with room to do it. He found room in the land of frost. There is a valley in the northern spine of that country, 11 kilometers long, that used to have a road through it and 2 hunting camps and a hot spring the locals used in winter. In the 8th month of the trip, a blond boy walked down into that valley at sunrise, planted himself in the middle of it, and put both palms and both feet flat against the ground. Jiraiya was standing on the ridge with a rice ball in his hand. Permafrost, Naruto said. The sound that came out of the ground was a bass roar, the noise a glacier makes when it decides to move. It went out from him in a ring, and it went down. And Jiraiya felt it arrive in the soles of his boots 11 kilometers away and dropped the rice ball out of his hand. The valley floor turned white. Then it turned blue. Then the trees along the slopes began to fail from the roots up, one after another, hundreds of them, cracking and going over, because the earth they were standing in had frozen solid to a depth of 30 feet, and every root in it had burst at the cell wall. The hot spring stopped. The steam column that had risen out of that ground for 400 years bent, thinned, and quit. It took 9 minutes for the roar to stop rolling. Jiraiya walked down into the valley an hour later. The air hurt his lungs. Frost came off his breath and fell as powder instead of hanging. The hunting camp at the north end had frozen into the ground so hard that the timber had split lengthwise along every board. Naruto was sitting on a rock with frost in his eyebrows, breathing like a man who had just finished a long swim. "That will hold for a decade," he said. "Possibly longer. We should leave the road markers and warn the villages downstream about the water table." "You?" Jiraiya looked around at 11 kilometers of dead white. "Kid, you killed a valley." "I killed a battlefield." Naruto stood up and dusted his palms. "It happened to have a valley on it." That night, in an inn in a town 2 days south, Jiraiya of the Sannin took out the small brown journal he had kept since he was 19 years old and wrote the 9th entry of the trip. The entries had been getting shorter for months, which anyone who knew him would have recognized as a symptom. Month 8. He can freeze the ground to the depth of a well shaft across a radius wider than the Konoha wall. He named it himself. He was disappointed in the fall-off at the edges. The rest of the trip is the two of them working and the world starting to move around them. He built Iceport in the 11th month, which is the technique that ruined Jiraiya's ability to be surprised by anything for the remainder of his life. It started as a trick, laying a film of ice on two surfaces and stepping through the space between them, 10 meters, then 30. By the 15th month, it was 100 meters. By the 20th, he was laying a thread of frost across a landscape ahead of himself while running and porting along it in half-kilometer jumps, and he crossed the land of rivers in a single afternoon while Jiraiya took a boat. He got faster. He got colder. He learned to hold frost armor for 11 hours without dropping it, and to run the absolute zero aura at a low sustained burn instead of a release, so that any room he entered was a room with a temperature problem before he said a word. And the cryomancy stopped being a set of techniques and became a condition of the air around him. In the 24th month, in a mountain pass in the land of Earth, 4 B-rank missing Nin who had been robbing pilgrims for 2 years made the last professional decision of their careers and jumped a blonde teenager on the road. Jiraiya was 40 meters back, buying tea. He came around the bend with 2 cups in his hands to find 4 men standing in the pass in a row, frozen from the ground to the collarbone, in the postures of men who had been mid-lunge, and a boy walking past them without turning his head. "Left them alive," Jiraiya observed. "They will thaw," Naruto said. "There is a border post 6 kilometers on. I marked the road." Jiraiya's final entry in the Brown Journal is dated 11 days before they came home. It is 1 line long, and Tsunade has it in a drawer in the Hokage's desk to this day. "I came out here to teach the kid. I think I'm watching something that doesn't need to be taught. It needs to be witnessed." They came back through the main gate on a hot morning in the 5th month, and the first thing Naruto Uzumaki saw of his village in 2.5 years was his own name on a wall. The acknowledgement stone near the base of the Hokage Tower had been extended by 4 feet of new granite. Somebody had done the carving with real care. Frost Grandmaster Uzumaki Inn, Defense of Konoha, Invasion Year 54. "They put you on the wall," Jiraiya said, delighted. "I noticed. Merchants have been doing cups for 2 years. There's a brand of shaved ice with your face on the paper cone. I am aware of the cups. Tsunade was waiting for them at the gate itself, which is a thing Hokage do exactly never, standing in the shade of the guard post with her arms folded and Shizune beside her, holding a folder that was thicker than a brick. She looked at the boy who had left as a 12-year-old and had come back a head taller with shoulders in the tunic and a black mask hanging down around his throat. And her first thought was the thought of a medic, which is that his resting body temperature was visibly wrong. The air around him bent the light like the air over a cold lake. Her second thought was that everything she had been warned about had been an understatement. "Uzumaki, Lady Hokage, you froze a valley. I froze 11 kilometers of one. There is a survey team from the Land of Frost still arguing about the water table. They sent me a bill, Tsunade said. Pay it, Naruto said. It was a good valley, and I ruined it. That is a debt. Tsunade stared at him. Then she laughed once, a short bark with no humor and a great deal of relief in it, and jerked her head toward the tower. Come on. You need the briefing, and I need you to hear all of it before you do anything. Here is the briefing, and here is where the finale actually begins. 2.5 years is a long time in a war nobody has declared yet. The organization in the black cloaks with the red clouds had spent it getting organized. 9 members, S rank every one of them, 5 nations worth of bingo book between them. They had money. They had a base network. They had a leader nobody had ever seen who ran a country out of a tower in the rain. And they had a plan with a shape now, because the shape had started to show in the pattern of what they took. Tailed beasts, Tsunade said. They have been going after Jinchuriki for 18 months. Confirmed loss of the 4 tails host from Iwa. Probable loss of the 5. Kumo has pulled both of theirs inside the mountain and will shoot anything with a red cloud on it out of the sky on sight. She dropped the folder on the desk. We do not know what 9-tailed beasts get you. We know they want all 9, and we know you are one of them, and we know they have been building the approach to Konoha for a year. Jiraiya took over. They lost Hidan and Kakuzu on a fire country job. That was us, Asuma's team plus Shikamaru's plan, and it cost us Asuma. He said it flat, because it's still cut. So they are down to 7. 2 of them have been sighted on our border in the last month. Deidara of Iwa, explosive release, and Sasori of the Red Sand, who as far as anyone can prove has never lost a fight in 20 years. Naruto listened to all of it. He stood in front of the desk with his hands at his sides, and he did not interrupt once, and he did not ask about the losses or the funerals or the seal that Tsunade had been drafting in case somebody came for his stomach. He asked 2 questions. Where are they operating? Tsunade pushed the map across. And how many are there? 7. Naruto looked at the map for 11 seconds. He put one finger on the northern border of Fire Country, on a ridge line above the Kawa Road, and then he took his hand back. Then I will start on this side and work inward. He said. Shizune, who had been holding the folder for the entire meeting and had said nothing, would later tell Ino Yamanaka that the temperature in the Hokage's office went down 4 degrees when he said it, and that Tsunade had not corrected him, and that Shizune, had understood in that moment that a war which everyone else was preparing to survive was being treated by one person in the room as a scheduling problem. Deidara found him on the ridge above the Kawa Road 8 days later, which is exactly where Naruto had put his finger. Deidara was 200 meters up on a clay bird with his hands in his pouches and his cloak snapping in the wind. And he had done this 11 times to 11 different targets, and every single one of them had spent the first 10 seconds of the fight looking up. Jinchuriki, he shouted down. You're the ice one, They said you were the ice one. He laughed. You know what your problem is? You're a defensive artist. Walls, armor, statues. You stop things. He pulled his hands out of the pouches, and there was a great deal of chewed clay in them. Art isn't about stopping. Art is a single moment, and then nothing. Watch. The clay came off his palms and grew. The C2 dragon assembled itself in the air over the ridge in the time it takes to draw one breath. 30 meters nose to tail, wings, jaws, a body full of ordnance. It banked once and opened its belly, and the payload came out, and the payload was 30 separate charges. And Deidara had used 4 of those to erase a caravan of 80 men in the land of wind. And today he had 30 in one target, 2 kilometers of blast radius if he set them all off together. He intended to. Naruto watched 30 bombs fall toward him and stayed where he was. Then he took one step forward and cracked his neck. I have killed gods, he said. You are not one. Blizzard burst. The wind came out of him and went up. This is the difference the time skip made, and I want you to see it clearly. In part 1, Blizzard burst was a wall down a corridor. Here is a weather front. It went up off the ridge in a rising white front, 200 meters tall, and it met 30 falling bombs at the halfway point. And it did the single thing Deidara had never once had to account for in his entire career. It froze the clay. Explosive release works because the chakra propagates through the clay's liquid medium. It needs the wet to travel. The blizzard burst took the wet out of 30 charges in under a second, and 32-kilometer detonations became 30 rocks. They hit the ridge like a bucket of gravel emptied off a roof. Deidara looked down at the ridge. Then he looked at his own hands. Then he said, at the top of his voice, "What? Ice hammer!" The air over Naruto's head compressed and became 5 feet of glacial maul on a 4-foot haft, and Naruto went up the slope in 3 strides and came off the ridge crest with everything he had behind the swing, and the head of that hammer hit the underside of the C2 dragon at the joint of the left wing. The freeze went through the construct from the impact point outward. The wing seized. The body seized. 30 meters of clay dragon turned to blue glass in the air and came apart in a cascade of frozen plates that fell over half a kilometer of hillside and rang when they landed. Deidara dropped 200 meters into a tree line, hit 4 branches on the way down, and got up before he had finished landing. Because whatever else you want to say about Deidara of Iwa, the man was a professional. He was already through the seals. C4, he said, and his voice had gone thin. Understand what that technique is. The cloud that came out of him spread across a 100-meter radius as a haze so fine you could breathe it without noticing, and every particle in it was a charge, and when it detonated inside the target, inside the lungs, inside the blood, at a scale where armor and walls and bone all become irrelevant. He had used it twice in his life. Both times, the target had stopped existing. Naruto was already ahead of him. Deep freeze. The beam left both palms and hit the leading edge of the cloud at the boundary of the radius, and the freezing front went through that haze faster than the detonation could travel through it. The cloud stopped moving. It hung there, 100 meters across, every particle in it locked in suspension, glittering in the afternoon sun over the ridge like somebody had thrown 100,000 grains of powdered glass into the air and pressed pause. It stayed up for 11 seconds. Then it began to come down, all at once, all across the hillside, falling as cold, dead dust over the grass and the frozen rocks and the shoulders of the man who had made it. Deidara stood in a snowfall of his own masterpiece with his mouth open. Your art, Naruto said, walking down the slope, requires heat to function. You chose the wrong opponent. He reached down and drew the Kori blade out of the ice formation at his feet, 2 feet of edge that came out of the ground already sharp. Your C0 remains, the implosion technique, the one that unmakes you along with everything inside a 10-kilometer circle. You are considering it. Deidara's hand had already gone to his own chest, to the stitches over the mouth on his sternum. He stopped. If you detonate yourself, you die, Naruto said. The blast will reach me. I will freeze it at the boundary the way I froze the rest. You will have accomplished nothing at all, and the last thing you will ever make will be a crater with a man standing in the middle of it. He let the blade hang at his side. Or you can accept the outcome of this fight and leave carrying information instead of a detonation cord. The hand stayed on the chest for a long 4 seconds. Run. Tell them what you saw. Deidara ran. He got 19 kilometers before he stopped on a rock and sat down and started shaking. And it was not fear exactly. It was the specific horror of an artist who has just found out that the medium he built his entire soul around has a temperature at which it stops being art and starts being mud. He told them. He told all of them, in a cave, in front of 6 holograms, and he used the words, "It took my C4 out of the air, and it fell on me like snow." And Kasame Hoshigaki looked at the floor, and Itachi Uchiha said nothing whatsoever, and it changed nothing about the schedule. Because the man in the mask had already decided that schedules were for people with less time than he had. But he told them. Sasori of the Red Sand did not scout. He arrived. He came up the Kawa Road 4 days later inside a hunchbacked cloak with an iron tail hanging out the back. And he did not announce himself. And he did not talk about art. And he did not give Naruto Uzumaki 200 meters of altitude and a warning shot. He picked a canyon 11 kilometers inside the border, put himself at one end of it, and unrolled 100 scrolls at once. Understand what 100 puppets is. Every one of them was a shinobi. Sasori had killed and then rebuilt into a delivery system. blades in the forearms, poison in the joints, tubes, hooks, saws, senbon launchers, flamethrowers, and every single edge on every single one of them wet with a compound he had spent 30 years refining, 200 meters of canyon filled with them, floor to walls, hanging off the rock like a swarm that had learned geometry. Red secret technique, Sasori said. Performance of 100 puppets. They came at Naruto from every angle in the same second. This is the hardest fight of the entire Akatsuki campaign, and I want to be honest about it from the start, because Sasori is the one who made him bleed. The first wave died on frost armor. Naruto let them come in, and the ice bloomed over him a fraction ahead of each impact. And 40 blades broke against him in 11 seconds, and the sound was a chandelier being fed into a wood chipper. He put the ice axes into the second wave, twin heads, short hafts, and he went through 8 puppets in a spinning line and left them in pieces on the canyon floor with the frozen mechanism still trying to fire. The third wave came from underneath. Sasori had buried 11 of them in the canyon floor before Naruto arrived, and they came up through the shale in a ring. And one of them got a tube past the armor at the crease behind the left knee, where the ice was thinnest because the joint had to bend. The needle went in 3/4 of an inch. Naruto felt the compound enter him, and he knew exactly what it was inside 2 seconds, because he had been poisoned before, in a swamp in Outworld, by something with more teeth and less patience. 3 days. That is the design life of Sasori's primary compound. 3 days of the nervous system shutting down one branch at a time from the extremity inward, and there is no version of it where the target fights through the second hour at full output. So Naruto did the thing that only a cryomancer can do. He pushed the cold inward. He ran the freeze into his own bloodstream, down the femoral, up through the trunk, into his own core, and dropped his body temperature to a number that would have stopped a normal man's heart in 11 minutes. Metabolic absorption slowed to almost nothing. The poison stayed in the leg, sluggish, crawling alive and waiting. He bought himself hours. He paid for them in output. And Sasori of the Red Sand, who had been reading opponents for 30 years, saw the frost on the boy's lips and read it correctly, and pressed. The fight ran for 50 minutes. Naruto fought it colder and slower than he had fought anything since he was 6 years old in a stone room, and the canyon filled with wreckage, puppet arms, frozen tubes, 100 years of dead craftsmanship piling up against the rock walls. Every time he took ground, 3 more came off the walls. Every time he built a wall, a saw came through it. Twice he had to take a hit he would ordinarily have refused. Then, in the 51st minute, he stopped moving. He planted himself in the middle of the canyon floor with the puppets closing from both ends, and he drew, not from the air, from everything. He pulled the moisture out of the rock faces, out of the shale under his feet, out of the dry canyon soil 11 meters down, out of the moss in the cracks and the water in the seep at the eastern wall, and the humidity in 200 meters of open air. And the temperature in that canyon fell off a shelf. The puppets began to seize. You could hear it happen. Ice formed in the joint housings, in the swivel rings, in the launch tubes, in the fine gearing that Sasori had spent decades machining down to tolerances of a hair. And every one of those tolerances stopped being a tolerance. One arm locked mid-swing, then a shoulder, then a whole body hanging in the air, and it came down on the shale and stayed there. 40 of them stopped in 8 seconds, 60 in 12. Glacial tomb, Naruto said. It went up around the nearest 20 of them at once, and this is the first time the world sees this technique, so hold still for it. The moisture he had drawn came together into walls, floor, 4 sides, a ceiling, layered ice a meter thick going up out of the canyon floor in a rising groan, and inside those walls the temperature went to absolute minimum, and it sealed. 20 puppets, frozen alive inside a blue room, preserved. It is a verdict, rather than an attack. Whatever is inside a glacial tomb stays exactly as it was until the man who built it decides otherwise. Sasori looked at his own theater going still in front of him. Then he abandoned all of it. The hunchback cloak came off, and what came forward out of it was the third Kazekage, the crown of his collection, the puppet made from a Kage, the one he had never once needed. And behind that came the core body, And Sasori of the red sand raised one hand and lifted the iron sand out of the puppet's back in a cloud that blotted out the sky above the canyon. Iron Sand World Order. The sand came together into spikes. Not one, hundreds. A ceiling of black iron thorns 30 meters across, every one of them longer than a man, and it came down on the canyon floor with the weight of a collapsing building. Naruto did not dodge it. He could not have. He was cold and slow, and the leg was bad. He took it. The frost armor held for the first 3 impacts and failed on the 4th, and a spike of iron went through the outside of his right shoulder and pinned him to the shale, and 2 more came down across his back and drove him to one knee, and the entire weight of that construct settled onto him in a shriek of iron on ice. Sasori's face, which had not changed expression in 30 years, changed slightly. It was almost recognition. It was the look of a man arriving at the end of a long piece of work, and under the iron, Naruto Uzumaki got both hands around the base of the spike in his shoulder. The iron sand is magnetism. That is the whole trick. Sasori's magnetic release running through the puppet's core and out into the iron, holding every grain of it in shape by pulling on the free electrons in the metal. Free electrons need to move. Absolute zero, Naruto said, and he put it directly into the metal. The temperature went into the iron and traveled through the entire connected mass in a single instant, and 30 meters of Iron Sand World Order stopped conducting. All of it dropped. Hundreds of tons of iron lost its shape simultaneously and hit the canyon floor as loose grit, and the sound was one enormous flat thunderclap that rolled up the canyon and out over the trees, and 11 kilometers away, a border patrol of 4 Konohachunin threw themselves flat in the dirt. The dust took 10 seconds to settle. When it did, Naruto Uzumaki was standing up out of a drift of dead iron with a hole through his shoulder and frost on his eyelashes, and the 3rd Kazekage puppet was locked at every joint, and Sasori's core body was standing in the middle of an empty canyon with his life's work in pieces around his feet. He looked down at his own hands. 30 years, he said. Your bloodline ends here. The Kori blade formed in Naruto's right hand as he crossed the distance, and it went into Sasori's core body at the sternum and out through the back, and it went through the cylinder in his chest, the one organ he had kept, the heart container with his own clan seal painted on the side, the thing he had built an entire immortal body around protecting for 3 decades. The ice went into it. Naruto held the position for 3 full seconds, eyes forward, his masked face 6 inches from the puppet masters, and he watched the light go out behind those eyes the way you watch a stove cool. Then he pulled the blade out and let the body fall. Sasori of the red sand came apart on the canyon floor into a scatter of wooden parts, and one of them was a cylinder with a clan seal on it, and it was full of ice. The canyon began to thaw an hour after Naruto walked out of it. He went through Sasori's storage scrolls first. He was thorough about it, and he did it sitting down because standing had stopped being free. 3 antidote vials in a sealed case in the 2nd scroll, labeled in the puppeteer's own hand, because a man who works with poison keeps a way back for himself. Naruto read the labels, chose the correct one, and put it in his own thigh with a steadiness that had nothing to do with courage, and everything to do with a mountain temple, where a boy in blue robes had learned that panic is a thing you schedule for later. Then he let his body temperature come back up. That was the worst part, and I'm going to say it plainly, because the story has spent 2 arcs telling you nothing touches him, and this is the moment where something did. When the cold came out of him, the poison woke up in his leg and got moving, and the antidote met it somewhere around the hip, and the 2 of them fought it out for 4 hours in a canyon full of frozen puppets, while Naruto Uzumaki sat against a rock with a hole in his shoulder and wrote it. He did not pass out. He came close twice. At dusk, he stood up, put a sheet of ice on the shoulder wound, and walked 22 kilometers to the border post. And the 2 Chunin on duty there watched a teenager come out of the tree line with a soaked sleeve and frost coming off him in the summer heat, and one of them dropped a lantern. Send to the Hokage, Naruto said. Sasori of the red sand is dead in the canyon at grid 411. His puppet inventory is intact and should be recovered before scavengers reach it. Some of it was people. Then he sat down on their step and he stayed there for 11 hours. And neither of those Chunin slept or spoke or moved from the doorway the entire time. Tsunade set to shoulder herself when he got home. She also spent 40 minutes yelling at him about core temperature, which he absorbed the way he absorbed everything. And at the end of it, she pressed 2 fingers under his jaw and held them there and did the math on a pulse that was running at 41 beats a minute. "You are down 11%, she said. "For a month, I want you eating twice what you were eating, and I want you sleeping. Understood, Lady Hokage?" "Do you actually understand it, or are you saying the words?" "I have run out of blood in a body before," Naruto said. "I know the cost of pretending I have more than I have. You will get no argument from me." Tsunade looked at him for a second. "Kami," she said, "you are the easiest patient in this building, and it makes my skin crawl." Kabuto Yakushi stepped out of a tree line in broad daylight on a road outside a border town 11 days later, and he did it with his hands up and his chakra scalpels already lit, which is a mixed message that tells you exactly how much thought had gone into the approach. "Naruto," he said and smiled. "Look at you. Taller. Kabuto Yakushi." Naruto stopped walking. "You have 30 seconds to say the whole thing." Kabuto said the whole thing, and to his credit, he said it well. Orochimaru would like a meeting. The world is changing shape. The Akatsuki, the masked shadow behind them, the collection of the tailed beasts. An endgame that ends with everybody's autonomy in somebody else's jar. Enemies in common. A partnership between 2 parties who both prefer being the ones holding the knife. Access to research, access to bodies, access to a network that has eyes in 5 nations. The whole thing had a rhythm to it. Kabuto had been the smartest man in every room he had ever entered, and he had a way of talking that presumed the room would agree. And that presumption had a 9-year track record. Naruto let him get to the end. Then, without moving, without heat, he said, "Kabuto, where is he?" Kabuto's smile stayed on his face for 1 second longer than his eyes did. "The mountain facility," he said. "North Ryuchi Range. He is expecting you." "I am aware that he is expecting me. That is why I am going." The facility was cut into the rock, 300 meters of corridor and chamber, torch-lit because Orochimaru liked torches, lined with sealed tanks and sealed doors and things in the tanks that were still moving. Naruto walked in through the front. He had been converting the atmosphere since he crossed the threshold. Not a release, nothing anybody could see. The slow burn, the sustained draw, 100 meters of corridor losing 4 degrees a minute behind him while he walked. Orochimaru was standing in the main hall in his host body, in the open, with both hands visible, because after 2 years he knew better than to open a conversation with this particular person from concealment. His right arm hung gray from the shoulder down. "There you are," Orochimaru said, and his voice had the old delight in it, and that delight was the most impressive act of self-management in the recorded history of the shinobi world. "How you have grown. I have followed your career with enormous interest. I know your people are competent, and your file on me is 11 months out of date." Then correct it. The Sanin spread the hand that worked. "I will be direct, because I respect your time. The world is about to be reorganized by a man in a mask who intends to put every living being into a dream and keep them there. You and I want the same thing from that, for it to fail. I have research, I have facilities, I have a network older than the Akatsukis. You have..." He gestured at the air, at the frost that had already begun to crawl up the wall behind him. "Whatever this is, together it is over in a season. Apart, we each spend a decade on it." He said the whole pitch without once mentioning a forest, a tower, a shoulder, or an arm. That is not forgetfulness. That is method. Orochimaru's way of walking forward has always been to treat every previous defeat as an acceptable outcome that has already been filed. Naruto watched him through the mask for a moment. "You came into my forest and put a blade through a clone of me," he said, "and when I showed you the real thing, you ran." Orochimaru's smile held. "You came onto my Hokage's roof with 2 dead men and a barrier, and when I stepped through the barrier, you ran." Naruto looked around the hall, at the ceiling seams, at the floor tiles, at the vents. "And you built this. You prepared something for tonight because you are incapable of approaching a conversation without a trap under it. Whatever it is, it will fail. It always fails. Do you know, Orochimaru said pleasantly, I built this one for you in particular. He tapped the floor with his heel. The tiles opened along 4 seams, and the mist came up out of them. A fine gray suspension, engineered over 19 months by the greatest mind in the field, a paralytic compound designed with one target's temperature profile in mind. It stayed liquid at 40 below. It bonded to the chakra pathway lining. It locked a network solid in 11 seconds, and there was no version of it that a cryomancer could freeze out of the air, because it had been built to work in the cold. It came up out of the floor and hit an ambient temperature of -68. The compound crystallized in the first meter of its rise and fell back into the vents as gray sand. Orochimaru looked at his own trap failing at knee height. Ah, he said. It has been dropping since I came through the door, Naruto said. 19 months of work. You should have asked what the room would be. Then Orochimaru did what he does, which is stop negotiating and start spending. Impure world reincarnation. 3 coffins came up out of the floor of the main hall, and what walked out of them were 3 of his experimental subjects. Not Kage, better than Kage for this purpose. 3 bodies he had built over decades with cursed seal grafts and bloodline transplants, and a regeneration rate that made damage a scheduling issue rather than a problem. And in the same movement, Orochimaru's jaw came open and the transfer began. Because he had a second host in a tank in the West Wing with a working arm and a chakra system like a foundry, and he intended to fight this at full capacity, the 3 subjects came across the hall together. Glacial tomb, Naruto said. The first one went up around the leftmost subject before it had crossed 6 meters. Floor, walls, ceiling, sealed, absolute minimum inside. The regeneration tried. That is the part I want you to sit with. The reanimation's own maintenance cycle kicked in the way it always does, and it required chakra to move, and chakra does not move at that temperature. And so the body inside the tomb simply held its last posture with one arm up like a man in a museum case. The second tomb went up 11 seconds later. The third subject was smarter, or Orochimaru's attention was more of it. It broke sideways, went up a wall, and came off the ceiling with both arms out and a cursed seal transformation halfway through blooming across its back. Ice port. Naruto stepped into the film of frost on the floor and out of the film of frost on the ceiling behind it, and the ice hammer came down on the base of its skull and drove it into the flagstones. And the third glacial tomb went up around it while it was still in the crater. 3 sealed chambers in the main hall of Orochimaru's mountain facility. In under a minute, standing in a row like exhibits nobody had asked for. And then the West Wing door came off its hinges and Orochimaru came out of it in a body that worked. I will give the man this much. He lasted. He was still a Sannin. He was in a host with 2 functioning arms and a chakra system that had been grown for exactly this. And he had 30 years of technique in a home field he had designed himself. And for 11 minutes, he made Naruto Uzumaki work through a mountain. Corridors. He collapsed 2 of them. Sealed chambers. He opened the tanks as he retreated and let out things with too many limbs. And Naruto put them down with ice balls that hit and popped like gunshots and left them frozen mid-stride in the hallway. He summoned Manda in the great cavern, and Manda came up out of the floor 11 stories tall with a mouthful of teeth the length of doors. And Naruto looked at a serpent the size of a warship and said, "Deep freeze." And the beam went into the roof of that mouth and up through the skull. And the largest snake in the world froze from the palate outward in 4 seconds and came down on its own summoner's escape route in a collapse that took out 300 meters of cavern wall. Orochimaru went through the rubble on his belly. He got to the main laboratory, which was the last room, and it was 100 meters long with shelves on both walls floor to ceiling, and on those shelves and jars was every single thing he had made in his life. Bloodline samples, cursed seal prototypes, organs, children who had never been born. 30 years in glass, cataloged in his own handwriting. He turned in the middle of it with his hands coming up for the 8 branches technique. Naruto walked into the room, and the room went white. It went shelf by shelf. That is the detail. It started at the door, and traveled down the 100-meter wall in a spreading crackle, and each jar as it went burst. Pop, 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 400 of them in 11 seconds. Glass and frozen contents dropping onto the floor in a line that chased Orochimaru backward down his own laboratory while he watched his life come apart in his peripheral vision. He fired everything. Sword of Kusanagi out of his mouth, which froze at the hilt and broke off in his hand. Body replacement, which put him 11 meters left and inside the radius anyway. A summon, which arrived and stopped moving. Sage-grade wind. Earth walls that grew and cracked and fell over. By the end of the 100 meters, he was against the back wall of his own facility, with his legs locked from the knees down in a spreading layer of permafrost that had come up through the flagstones without a sound. He looked across an icy floor at a 16-year-old in a blue tunic with glacial blue burning behind the mask. And he said the closest thing to honesty he had ever offered a living being. "I am the greatest shinobi alive," Orochimaru said. "I have transcended death. There is nothing in this world that can end me. I have looked. I have opened up 1,100 bodies looking, and I know every door out of this, and I am telling you as a matter of record that I cannot be ended. This is a wall," Naruto said, "and you are standing against it." The Kori blade came up. It went through Orochimaru's chest at the fourth rib, through the heart of the host body, out through the spine, through the flagstone floor behind him, and 11 inches into the mountain. Orochimaru's mouth opened, and the true body came out of it. Of course it did. The white serpent form, the final failsafe, thousands of smaller snakes braided into one enormous pale mass, and it tore itself up and out of the ruined host in a spray, and it came at the mask with its jaws wide because there was one target in the room and one option left. Naruto had been waiting for it since the corridor. Deep freeze. Full output. Point blank, into an open mouth. 2 tons of white serpent frozen mid-lunge. It stopped 6 inches from his face. The jaws stayed open. Every one of the smaller snakes woven into that body, locked in the position it had been thrashing in, and the whole thing set into a column of blue-white ice that ran from the laboratory floor to the ceiling, and cracked the stone on both sides with a groan that went up through the mountain. Naruto stood in front of it for a moment. He looked into the frozen mouth of the most feared shinobi alive, at a serpent's eye the size of a dinner plate, with the last 3/4 of a second of thought still in it, and he said nothing at all, because there was nobody left in the room to hear it. Then he walked out. Kabuto Yakushi was in the observation gallery above the main hall, and he watched the whole last 11 minutes on the monitors. And this is his part of the story, so give it to him. He watched the paralytic fail. He watched 3 reanimations get sealed inside blue rooms in 58 seconds. He watched Manda die. He watched 400 jars burst in a line down a wall he had cataloged himself. Kabuto Yakushi had built an entire self out of being the most prepared person in every room. He had files. He had contingencies for contingencies. He had spent 9 years arranging things so that no event could arrive without him having already thought about it. Because a boy who grows up with no name and no face has to build his skeleton out of something. And he sat in that gallery and understood, with the corridors below him dropping through -70 and the frost climbing the observation glass, that somebody had frozen the room. You cannot prepare for the room. He ran. He went out through the north service shaft with 3 scrolls, his glasses fog solid, and he left everything else, and he was still running at dawn. He would spend the rest of his life rebuilding his framework around one fact. And here is the fact. Preparation is a bet that the situation will have a shape. Some situations have a temperature instead. They came for Konoha at dawn on the 11th of the 8th month. 6 bodies, 6 pairs of ringed purple eyes, one mind behind all of them in a tower 90 kilometers away, and an intent that was never a military operation. Nagato Uzumaki had sent his past to remove Konohagakure from the map in order to demonstrate a philosophy, and there is a version of that morning where he does it in 20 minutes and leaves a crater with a lake in it. The Deva path came over the north wall with the Preta, the Asura, and the animal path. The human and the Naraka came in from the east. The plan was simple, and it had worked on smaller places. Drive everything toward the center, erase the center, They got 4 minutes. Here is what those 4 minutes cost, because it has to be counted. The animal path summoned the drilling rhino into the northern residential district, and it went through 11 buildings before anyone reached it, and the buildings were occupied. The Ashura path put a missile through the east watch post and took the entire watch with it. A Chunin named Tori held a street with 8 civilians behind him for 40 seconds against the human path, and then he did not. 41 people died in 4 minutes. At the 4-minute mark, the temperature in Konohagakure started to fall. Naruto Uzumaki had been on the Hokage Tower roof since the first alarm, and he had spent 30 of those seconds looking at a map, because he had drawn that map 2 years ago and had been updating it every month since. This is what makes this fight different from every other fight in this story. He is not reacting. He is not chasing 6 enemies through a city. He is running a funnel he built during peacetime, and every intersection in the northern half of Konoha has a layer of frost under the paving stones that has been sitting there since spring. All units, he said, and the messenger corps carried it in 11 directions. Break contact. Fall back west of the 3rd Avenue crossing and hold there. Do not engage. Move the civilians into the Hokage Monument shelters and seal them. Kakashi's voice came back through the relay from the north. Naruto, there are 6 of them, and they revive each other. We do not have. I know how many there are. Break contact. And then he went down off the roof, and Konoha's streets began to freeze from the inside out. The Prita Path met him first at the North Market crossing, and the Prita Path is the answer to every jutsu in the world. It absorbs. It eats a fire technique out of the air, drinks a lightning technique off a blade, takes chakra at the source and gives nothing back. Nagato put it forward first on purpose, because you lead with the wall. It walked into Naruto's Absolute Zero aura with both hands out and the absorption barrier already up. And nothing happened, because there was nothing to absorb. Understand this, because Nagato needed 11 seconds to understand it, and 11 seconds was the whole conversation. Cryomancy at this level is not a chakra construct being thrown at a target. It is a change in the state of the air in a room. There is no signature to grab, no stream to intercept, no source to pull from. You cannot eat the cold. The Prita Path stood there with its barrier up and its hands out while the moisture in the ambient atmosphere came out of suspension and settled on its forearms as rime. Then Naruto took the reaching hands, one in each of his, and held them. The barrier could do nothing about a grip. The freeze went through both wrists to the elbow in a second and a half, and the sound the Prita Path's hands made when Naruto let go of them and they hit the paving stones was 2 flat pops, one after the other. Nagato pulled it back on the 3rd second with no hands. He can't absorb it, Kakashi said out loud, on a rooftop 3 streets over, to nobody. He can't absorb it. The animal path came next with everything it had, because if one path cannot take the technique, then the answer is volume. It went through the summoning cycle 4 times in 11 seconds. The multi-headed dog, the enormous crustacean, the drilling rhino, the great bird, and it put all 4 into a single intersection at once. And that intersection was one that Naruto Uzumaki had personally been laying ice under for 2 years. Ground ice. The street went white so fast that the great bird's talons welded to the stone in mid-landing. The rhino's forelegs locked. The multi-headed dog, which cannot be killed by ordinary damage and simply splits and regenerates, split, and every one of the splits came off the ground on legs that had already frozen to the pavement, and they went over sideways one after another like a shelf of dominoes. Blizzard burst. The white front came down that street at the speed of a landslide and took the entire intersection. When it cleared, there were 4 summoned creatures in the North Market of Konohagakure, standing in postures of arrested violence, encased in blue, and the largest of them was 11 meters at the shoulder. Civilians in the shelters felt the crack of that freeze through 40 feet of monument stone. And the animal path, with an entire summoning inventory sitting in a market square as statuary, did the thing that Nagato has never once had to do in the history of this technique. It withdrew and recalibrated. He is pulling back, Shikamaru Nara said from the command post, staring at the reports coming in on paper slips. His hands were flat on the table. 6 bodies, 1 brain, and the brain just pulled back. He is losing the initiative. Somebody get me the district map. I want to know where Naruto is putting them. He is putting them at 3rd Avenue, Ino said. He is putting them at 3rd Avenue, Shikamaru agreed. And then he sat down because he had just understood that a battle he had been treating as a catastrophe was a machine somebody else had already built. And his job for the next 11 minutes was to stay out of the gears. The Ashura path came down 3rd Avenue. Mechanized body, arm cannons, missile racks in the shoulders, a chest that opens into a beam emitter, the heaviest of the 6, and it operates on hydraulics and gearing and pressurized fluid in a chassis that was engineered by a man who has never in his life had to consider a cold weather deployment. It fired 4 missiles into the avenue, and the missiles arrived, and Naruto was already through the frost film on the street and out of the frost film on a chimney 40 meters up. Iceport. The avenue behind him came apart. Then he dropped. He came down on the Asura path from 40 meters with both hands closing. Ice axes. The heads formed 6 inches before impact and went into the thing's shoulder assemblies to the haft. And the absolute zero went into the chassis through the wound channels, and the entire body of the Asura path locked from the inside. Hydraulic fluid at minus 90 stops being fluid. The extension arms froze in their housings. The missile rack seized halfway through a reload with a live warhead in the tray. The beam emitter in its chest tried to open and jammed at a hand's width, and the energy backed up behind the aperture, and the Ashura path of pain blew its own thorax out from inside and fell over in the middle of 3rd Avenue in 3 large pieces. The human path made it to within 1 arm's length of him at the 3rd Avenue crossing, and its technique requires exactly that. Physical contact, a hand on the head, and the soul comes out. It got the hand up. Naruto caught it by the wrist. The frost armor on his own skin took the path's palm and froze it to the ice on Naruto's forearm, and then kept going up its arm, and the technique never completed because the hand was no longer a hand, it was part of a fixture. Ice hammer. 1 swing into the side of the head, and the human path came off its feet and went through the front of a bakery and did not come out, which left 2, and one of them was the priority. The Naraka path is the reason the 6 paths of pain has never lost. It summons the King of Hell, and the King of Hell puts every other path back together. A body drops. The Naraka pulls it into the mouth, and it comes back out whole with the eyes still working. You can kill 5 paths in 5 minutes and lose the fight, because in the 6th minute, there are 6 again. Naruto reached it at the 3rd Avenue fountain before it had issued a single restoration. He did not fight it. Glacial tomb. He drew the moisture from 4 districts. Every frozen street in northern Konoha gave its water up at once, and it came together over the fountain plaza in a rising groan of layered ice. A chamber 4 meters on a side, walls a meter thick, floor, ceiling, sealed at every seam, and inside it the Naraka path and the 2-story face of the King of Hell that had just begun to rise out of the ground beside it. It's sealed with a sound like a bank vault the size of a house. Absolute minimum inside. No chakra movement. No restoration. The King of Hell's mouth stopped halfway open and stayed that way, and it's still there today, and the Konoha Council has voted 4 times about whether to move it and has lost the vote 4 times. The restoration network went down. And in a tower 90 kilometers away in the permanent reign of Omegakure, a man in a chair felt 5 of his 6 bodies go silent inside 11 minutes. And for the first time since he was a child watching his parents die on a kitchen floor, Nagato Uzumaki felt something he had eliminated from his life on purpose. He felt uncertainty. So he put everything into the last one. The Deva path walked into the 3rd Avenue crossing alone, and the gravity came up around it, and the paving stones in a 40-meter circle began to lift off the ground and turn. Naruto felt the pressure change in the air. He had felt it before. A different sky, a different set of laws, a god with 4 arms and a laugh, and the specific weight in the atmosphere that arrives when something is about to be pushed. Shinra Tensei, the Deva path said, almighty push at full charge, enough to erase 6 city blocks and everything in them down to the water table. Naruto Uzumaki walked toward it. He did not take cover. He did not throw a wall up. Every shinobi behind him at the western barricade, 40 of them, including 2 jonin and Kakashi Hatake with his headband up, watched a 16-year-old close distance on a charging gravitational event, and Kakashi said, "No," out loud, and started forward, and Guy's hand closed on his shoulder and held him. Frost came off Naruto's shoulders in a stream that fell up. "The NetherRealm forged me," he said. "You are a pale imitation of the worst thing I survived." He put both hands out, palms forward, 6 feet from the Devapath's own outstretched palm, and released. Absolute zero. 2 forces met at 0 distance. There was no explosion. I want to be exact about that, because everybody at the western barricade expected one and braced for one, and what they got was worse. The almighty push failed to propagate. Repulsion needs a medium to travel through. It needs the air. And the air, in the 6 feet between those 2 hands, went to a temperature at which air stops behaving like air, and the technique hit that boundary and could not get out of the emitter, and every ounce of force that was supposed to erase 6 blocks turned around and went home. The Devapath's arm folded backward at the elbow. Its chest caved in on itself. It came off the ground and went into the paving stones 11 meters back, and it lay there with both hands frozen solid to its own sternum and the rings in its eyes going out one at a time. 12 minutes, start to finish. The silence in Konohagakure after that lasted a long time. Nobody cheered. That is the detail I want you to have. Nobody cheered, because 41 people were dead in the North District, and the survivors were mostly still lying flat where they had been told to lie, and the air was cold enough that breathing hurt. Kakashi Hatake walked out into the middle of 3rd Avenue and looked at a path of pain lying in a crater with its hands frozen to its chest, and at a wall of ice around a fountain plaza with the King of Hell inside it, and at 4 summoned monsters standing frozen in the market 2 streets over. 12 minutes, he said. 11:40, Naruto said. Get the medics into the North District. There are people under the buildings, and the freeze will have slowed the bleeding on some of them, which buys us maybe 2 hours. He crouched over the Devapath and took a black rod off its belt, and the rod had a receiver in it. The conversation happened at a range of 90 kilometers, and there were 11 people close enough to hear Naruto's half of it, and every one of them has told the story differently, and all of them agree on the last part. Nagato Uzumaki, Naruto said into the rod. There was a long pause, and then a voice came through it, thin, tired, layered under machinery and rain. You know my name. You are the last of my mother's clan besides me. I have known your name for 2 years. Naruto sat down on a broken paving stone. Your paths are handled. 2 are sealed and will stay sealed. The rest are ended. Your invasion killed 41 people in this village, and I have to write to their families this week, so I'm going to ask you one question, and I would like the true answer. Ask it. What did pain teach you? You could hear the rain through the receiver, and Nagato answered, because nobody in 30 years had ever asked him that as a question instead of as a challenge, and a man who has built his entire theology on a single word will always talk if you use the word properly. He talked for 4 minutes. His parents on the kitchen floor, killed by Konoha shinobi who were frightened and hungry and far from home. Yahiko on the end of a blade he was holding himself. Conan's hands. A country that had been somebody else's battlefield for 4 generations, rained on, walked over, drained, and never once asked. And the conclusion, which he had arrived at honestly and had never found a hole in, that pain is the only universal language, that peace built on anything else is a bubble in a river, and that the only response with any integrity left in it is to become so terrible that the whole world learns the lesson at once. Pain taught me that everyone understands it, Nagato said. It is the one thing nobody has to be educated to feel. It is the only thing we all share. That is true, Naruto said. Then you agree. I agree with the observation. I have buried the conclusion twice. He turned the rod over in his hand. I was a slave in a place made entirely of pain, he said. I do not say that as a figure of speech. There is a realm where the ground is on fire and the screaming does not stop for a single hour, and I was there, dead with my mind still inside my body, serving a fallen god who had taken my will and left me my eyes. I lived in the exact world you are trying to build. Everyone in it understood pain perfectly. Every single one of them. It taught them nothing at all. He looked up at a street full of medics and rubble. Pain is a universal language with one word in it. You cannot say anything with it. You can only get someone's attention. Everything after that has to be built out of something else, and the building is the part you have never done. The rain went on through the receiver. I froze the ground under my own clan and took it back from my brother, Naruto said. It took 11 years. It was dull for most of them. There was no moment where the world learned. There were 4,000 mornings where I got up before dawn and did the next thing. That is what it actually costs, Nagato, and you skipped it, because it is boring and it is slow and no one writes it down. A long silence. I have one outcome to offer you, Naruto said. Stand down. Recall Konan. Take Akatsuki off a Megakure like a splint off a healed arm and let your country start rebuilding without it as the frame. The masked man behind you loses his instrument. Your people get a chance at the boring version, which is the only version that has ever worked. He paused. That is the whole offer. There is nothing in it for you. No, Nagato agreed. There is nothing in it for me. I know. Another silence, and then a sound through the receiver that might have been a laugh in a body that had no air left for one. Konan, Nagato said, away from the rod. Come here, please. And then to Naruto. I accept. He did one more thing after that, and nobody asked him to. The outer path. Samsara of heavenly life. The technique on the far side of the Renegade's abilities. The one that gives back what the eyes have taken. He used it from 90 kilometers away on the village he had spent 4 minutes destroying. And it cost him what that technique always costs. In the North District of Konohagakure, 41 people sat up. A chunin named Tori, who had held a street for 40 seconds, opened his eyes on a stretcher with a sheet over his face and pulled it off, and the medic standing over him screamed. 2 of the East Watch woke up in the collapsed watch post. A woman in the North Market found her son breathing under a beam that had crushed his chest an hour ago, and the sound she made brought 11 people running from 3 streets away. Naruto Uzumaki stood in the middle of 3rd Avenue with a black rod in his hand and watched 41 people come back, and he said nothing whatsoever, because there was nothing to say, and because Kuai Liang had learned somewhere in a mountain temple that you do not narrate a man's death to him while he is doing it. The receiver went silent halfway through. Konan came for the body 4 days later. She came alone in the rain that she brought with her, and she stood at the Konoha gate and asked permission, which is a thing no Akatsuki member had ever done. Naruto walked out to meet her and gave her the 2 sealed paths as well, thawed and returned, and the black rods, and a folded page with 11 names on it. The Amagakure reconstruction contacts he had already opened in the Land of Fire's Merchant Council, because he had started arranging that on the 2nd day. Konan looked at the page for a long moment. He said you were the first person who asked him a question. She said. He answered it honestly. That is rarer. She took the page. She left in the rain. Amegakure took its towers down over the following 3 years, and the flowers on Nagato's grave are paper, and they are replaced every spring by a woman who has stopped being anybody's angel. Sasuke Uchiha found his brother in the 11th month of the 2nd year, in a safe house 11 kilometers outside of Megakure, and he found him dying. I need to tell this part properly, because it belongs to Sasuke. 2.5 years of clarity. That is what the ice on his neck gave him. He trained at Naruto's ground at dawn for 8 months, and then he trained alone, and then he trained with Kakashi, and then he went out on missions and came back and went out again, and somewhere in the middle of it, he stopped waking up angry and started waking up early instead, which is a different thing. The revenge was still there. It had shrunk from an identity down to an item, one thing on a list, and there were other things on the list now, which is the part that would have been unimaginable to him at 13. So when he went looking for Itachi, he went as a man going to close an account, and he went alone because he had decided that was correct, and he left a note. What he found in that safe house was a 22-year-old man sitting on the floor against a wall with a cloth in his hand and blood on the cloth, and eyes that had gone milky at the edges, and a body that had been running on willpower and technique for 3 years past the point where the machinery could take it. They fought anyway. Of course they fought. It was a real fight, and it lasted 11 minutes, and Sasuke Uchiha found out that everything he had built in 2.5 years was almost enough. Amaterasu came off Itachi's eye and burned a hole through the safe house wall that is still burning. Susanoo came up around him, red and enormous. Pei-O and Sasuke's Chidori went into its ribs and stopped. He got put on his back twice, and then, in the 11th minute, Itachi Uchiha Susanoo came apart because the man inside it had run out of blood, and he went down on one knee in the middle of a wrecked room, and he started coughing and could not stop. Sasuke stood over him with a sword, and Itachi looked up at him with eyes that could barely resolve his face and said, "You are stronger than I thought you would be. I'm glad. There is something I have to tell you, and I'm going to be quick, because I have perhaps a quarter of an hour, and I have practiced this speech for 9 years, and I'm going to do it badly." Then he told him. It came out in pieces, and every piece was worse than the last. The Uchiha coup, real and planned, and 11 days from execution. The order that came down from 3 elders and a man named Danzo Shimura. The choice put in front of a 13-year-old Anbu captain. The clan or the village, and the village came with a rider, which was that his brother would be left alive. The night itself, which he described in 4 sentences and could not do the 5th. 9 years of building a monster on purpose. The mask, the cover story, the words on the wall of a Konoha police station in his own family's blood, and a genjutsu put on a 7-year-old that was designed to break him, and was also, if you look at it from an angle nobody should ever have to look at anything from, designed to give him a reason to keep breathing. "I needed you to have something to run toward," Itachi said. "Hate is a load-bearing wall. It holds a child up. I intended to be the wall until somebody built you a house, and then I intended to die on your sword so that you could put it down." He got that far. Then he laughed, and there was blood in it, and he said, "And then somebody came along and sealed the mark on your neck and killed the snake and broke my eye in a flooded street and made every single thing I built unnecessary." His hand came up, and he touched Sasuke's forehead with 2 fingers, and it was the gentlest thing anybody had done to Sasuke Uchiha in 11 years. "Forgive me. I have been so tired." He died about 6 minutes later, sitting against a wall, of the illness that had been killing him since he was 19. Naruto found the safe house 40 minutes after that. Because he had been tracking the Akatsuki's secondary courier routes and the trail ran through this valley. And because he had read Sasuke's note before he left, he walked in and stopped in the doorway. Sasuke was sitting on the floor next to his brother's body with his arms around his knees, and he was not crying, and the sword was on the other side of the room where he had dropped it. The eyes he had gone there to take were still in Itachi's head. The account had not closed. It had been rewritten in a hand he could not argue with, and there was nobody in the world left to be angry at except 4 names. And 2 of those names were old men who had died in their beds. Naruto crossed the room and sat down on the floor across from him. He did not say anything for a while. Then he said, his name was Bihan. Sasuke did not look up, but his head moved. He was my older brother by 3 years, and he was better than me at every single thing our clan measured. Faster, colder, more willing. I spent my childhood at the edge of a training floor watching him be perfect and learning to be adequate, and he told me the difference every day. And he was correct every day, which is the part that ruins you. Naruto had his forearms on his knees and he was looking at the wall. He was Sub-Zero before I was. The name was his. I was the second son with the second version of his blood, and everybody in that temple knew it. He breathed out. He took a contract in a place he should have walked away from, and it killed him. And something on the other side put him back together as a wraith and gave him a master. And what came back wearing my brother's face went through 11 villages and left nothing standing. I found him in the 4th one. He turned one hand over. I tried to reach him for 2 years. I am telling you that so you understand that I did the whole sequence. The pleading, the bargaining, the thing where you convince yourself there is a version of him still in there answering to the name. There was nothing in there. He had been hollowed out and refilled. And in the end, I put him down myself in the snow, and I did it with my hands. And he said my name once at the beginning, and it was in his voice. The safe house was silent, except for the rain starting up outside. Here is what nobody tells you, Naruto said. Carrying someone you loved and had to destroy is not like carrying grief, and it is not like carrying guilt. Grief you can set down at a grave. Guilt you can work off. This is a sword you cannot put down and cannot use. You take it everywhere. It gets no lighter. What changes is that your hands get stronger, and one day you notice you have been holding it for a decade and have also built a clan, and both of those things are true at the same time, and neither one cancels the other. He stopped talking. Sasuke Uchiha sat with that for a long time. Outside, the rain came harder. Then he said, in a voice that had almost nothing left in it, "What do I do with it?" Naruto stood up. "You already know," he said. "You have known since the hospital." He put a hand on Sasuke's shoulder for exactly 2 seconds, which is the longest he had touched another human being on purpose in either of his lives. And then he walked out into the rain and left him there. And the story stays in that room for a moment. Sasuke Uchiha sat next to his brother's body with the truth in his lap, and eventually he reached over and closed Itachi's eyes with his thumb, and then he pulled the cloak off the man and folded it. Because he had no idea what else to do with his hands, he carried the body home himself. It took 9 days. He walked in through the main gate of Konohagakure at noon on the 10th with his brother across his back and asked for a plot in the Uchiha ground. And he got one, and he stood at it alone in front of a stone that says Itachi Uchiha and nothing else, because he had refused every inscription the Mason offered and had been unable to write his own. The case against Danzo Shimura took Naruto 11 days to assemble, and he did it the way he did everything, which is to say he had already done most of it a decade in advance. Itachi's Anbu service records, which Kakashi pulled from the sealed archive with Tsunade's authorization and his own hands, shaking. Konoha military police duty rosters from the massacre week, cross-referenced against route deployment logs. The written coup plan itself, recovered from under the Nakano shrine floor by Sasuke, who read it first, alone, at 3 in the morning. And the route files. Here is the thing nobody in the village had ever thought to ask about, and it is the coldest detail in this entire story. When a 6-year-old walked out of an isolation cell in Danzo's basement in the year 51, he walked past an open records room on the way to the corridor, and he stopped for 90 seconds. Kuai Liang had run an intelligence apparatus for a clan of assassins for 30 years. 90 seconds is a long time. He had memorized 11 pages, including a directive numbered 304 with 3 elder seals and a signature on it. And he had carried those 11 pages in his head for 10 years while he waited for a Hokage who would act on them. He put all of it on Tsunade's desk on a Thursday morning, and he did not ask for anything. "I am presenting a case," he said. "You are the Hokage. The judgment is yours. I want it on record that I did it in this order." Tsunade read for 4 hours. Shizune brought tea twice and took it away untouched twice. At the end of it, she put both hands flat on the desk and sat there breathing, and then she said, "Bring him in. Full council session tomorrow, and I want the Anbu commander in the room, and I want him disarmed at the door." Danzo Shimura did not come to the session. He had known the case was being built for 6 days, because Danzo always knew. And at 4 in the morning on the day of the session, he left his compound with a bodyguard of 12 root Anbu and moved for the Eastern Service Gate with 3 sealed scrolls and a plan involving the land of rice. Naruto Uzumaki was standing in the middle of the gate road. He had been there since 2. 12, he said. "You brought 12. When you took me, you sent 2, and then you came yourself with 2 more, and I have thought about that ratio for 10 years. Danzo stopped 11 meters out. He did not bother with a preamble. Kill him. The 12 came off the road in a spread, and they were good. The best trained operatives in the village, silent, coordinated, no wasted movement, exactly the product that 11 children in a stone room had been converted into. Glacial tomb, Naruto said. 12 of them went up in a row. That is all. 12 chambers of layered ice, 4 meters on a side, rising out of the gate road in a line with a groan that woke everybody within half a kilometer, sealed at the seams, each one with a root ambu inside it in the exact posture of a man beginning a sprint. Alive, undamaged, frozen at attention in a row down the gate road like a parade nobody had asked for. The gate guards on duty, 2 chunin named Kotetsu and Izumo, described it in their incident report as the worst thing either of us has ever seen at 4 in the morning. And their captain accepted that as a professional assessment and filed it without changes. Danzo Shimura was left standing alone in the open with the sun coming up behind him and his right arm exposed. He unwrapped it. 10 Sharingan set into the flesh of his arm, and every one of them was harvested, and every one of them powered a technique that should never have existed outside a myth. Izanagi, the jutsu that takes an event you dislike and writes over it, that turns a fatal wound into a thing that did not happen, at the cost of 1 eye per correction. 10 eyes. 10 deaths he did not have to accept. He had planned his entire endgame around that number for 11 years. Naruto Uzumaki set his feet in the middle of the gate road and released the absolute zero as a field and then held it there. Not a burst. A sustained perimeter, 40 meters across, at an output he had first reached in a valley in the land of frost, and he kept it running for the next 4 minutes. Danzo came at him. The first Izanagi burned 11 seconds in when the Kori blade went through his throat. The technique fired, the wound rewrote itself, an eye on his arm closed forever. And it worked, and Danzo Shimura came out the other side of it whole and grinning. The second one burned at the 20-second mark. The third one failed. Here is the reason, and it is the reason all 7 of the rest failed too. Izanagi is a genjutsu cast on reality, and like every genjutsu, it requires a clear chakra flow and a conscious mind holding the shape of the lie for the full duration of the casting. Naruto had put Danzo Shimura inside a 40-meter field at minus 111 degrees, and inside that field, a man's chakra network runs like cold syrup, and a man's thoughts arrive 4/5 of a second late. The third Izanagi collapsed halfway through its own execution. The eye burned out anyway. So did the fourth. So did the fifth. I want you to see what that looks like from the outside, because 11 people watched it from the wall, and every one of them has described the same thing. An old man in the middle of a frozen road, throwing everything he had, and every time Naruto Uzumaki put him down, he came back up with 1 fewer eye, and it cost him more each time and bought him less. The 6th failed. The 7th failed. He used futon with a wind capacity that would have flattened a forest, and the wind arrived as sleet. He used the wood-style graft in his arm, and the tree came up out of the frozen road 11 feet and burst along its own trunk from the cold in the ground. He used a chakra-absorbing barrier, and it filled with rhyme. The 8th eye burned on a technique that had already failed before he finished the seals. The 9th burned on nothing at all. It fired on reflex when the ice hammer took his knee. And the correction happened, and it happened at 4/5 speed, and so his knee unbroke while he was already falling. He ran out of eyes at the 4-minute mark. Danzo Shimura ended up on his back in the middle of the gate road with 9 dead sockets in his arm and 1 Sharingan left in the socket over his own eye, and the field around him at a temperature at which his breath came out as falling powder, and a 16-year-old walking toward him at the pace of a man who has already finished. "Wait," Danzo said. "I built this village's foundation. Everything under the floor of this place I put there. You cannot." "You put a 6-year-old in a stone room in the winter and called it a forge," Naruto said. 11 of them. 9 came out obedient. 2 came out dead. And you kept the numbers because the numbers worked for you." He stopped 4 feet away. "You signed Directive 304 and gave a 13-year-old a choice with only 1 answer in it. And then you sent him out into the world with a story that made his own brother spend 9 years wanting to kill him, and you slept fine. I did what was necessary. Your bloodline ends here." He drove his hand into Danzo Shimura's chest. Not a blade. His open right hand, fingers straight, through the sternum, and the absolute zero went out of his palm into everything on the other side of it, And the old man's heart and both lungs and the entire chakra system, built out of 9 other men's stolen eyes, went to absolute minimum in a quarter of a second. Danzo's remaining Sharingan spun once, looking for an Izanagi that was no longer available. Then Naruto closed his hand and pulled it back out, and Danzo Shimura came apart from the chest outward, the freeze racing to the extremities, the arm with the 9 dead eyes going white to the fingertips, the whole body seizing on the frozen road, and what was left burst into a scatter of blue-white fragments across 40 meters of gate road with a sound like a chandelier hitting a marble floor. The founder of Root ended in 11 pieces the size of a fist, in the open, in front of a dozen witnesses on the wall, at sunrise. Naruto stood up and shook the frost off his hand. Then he walked down the line of glacial tombs and thawed all 12 of them himself, one at a time, and every Root operative inside came out of the ice on his knees on the gate road coughing, and Naruto crouched in front of the first one and pulled the mask off. He was maybe 19. He had a tattoo on his tongue that stopped him from speaking about his own life. "The man who owns you is dead," Naruto said. "You have a name. Somebody will help you get it back. There is work in this village for people who are good at what you are good at, and the work is different now." He stood and looked down the line of 12. "Get up, all of you. You are late for the rest of it." 11 of them enlisted in the Reformed Intelligence Division within the year. Sasuke Uchiha stood on the wall for the entire 4 minutes with his hands on the stone, and when it was over, he went to the memorial ground and sat in front of his brother's stone until dark. And the next morning, he showed up at Naruto's training ground at dawn with water and asked to be put on the war roster. The masked man moved his schedule up after that because he had run out of instruments. Deidara went missing in the land of Earth 11 days after the gate. Kasame Hoshigaki was found in a bay in the land of water by 2 fishermen in a block of ice the size of a boat, and Konoha's recovery team took 4 days to get him home. And Kakashi Hake looked at him for 11 minutes without saying anything, and then went home and slept for a day and a half. So Toby called the summit, not the summit, the 5 Kaji called that, in the land of iron, in the snow, to decide what to do about the organization in the red clouds. Toby decided to attend, which is a different thing. The Konoha delegation went up the mountain road in a convoy of 3 carriages, and 11 kilometers out from Iron's border keep, the road stood up. 73 white Zetsu came out of the ground at once. Plant matter constructs, grown in a cave in the land of rain, each one able to copy the chakra signature of whatever it touched and split off from it. They came up through the road's surface and out of the tree line on both sides in a wave, and they had been sent to separate the delegation and take one member of it alive. The Raikage's convoy was a mile behind. They felt what happened next through the ground, and A of Kumogakure had his hand on the carriage door and his lightning already up when it hit. Naruto Uzumaki stepped out of the lead carriage onto the road, went down onto both hands, and put both palms and both boot soles flat against the frozen mountain surface. "Permafrost," he said. The bass roar came up out of the mountain. The freeze went into the road and down and out, 30 feet deep, and it traveled through the soil and the rock and the roots in every direction, and it came up through 73 Zetsu from underneath. They are plants. That is the whole answer. Every one of those bodies was full of water in a cellular structure, and the permafrost took all of it at once from below. And the sound 73 plant constructs make when the water in their cells expands and bursts every wall simultaneously is a rolling wet crackle that goes on for 4 seconds and then stops. 73 of them went rigid where they stood. Arms up, mouths open. A garden that had decided to stop existing, standing in the middle of a mountain road in a haze of its own frozen breath. The convoy horses went down on their knees, all 6 of them, because the ground under their hooves had turned to something they had never been asked to stand on. The Raikage's carriage felt it a mile back. Every animal in it stopped. Got out into the snow and stood on the road with his brother beside him and looked at the frost front that had come up the mountain and passed under them and kept going. And he said out loud, "What in the name of the second is happening up there?" Darui, standing behind him, checked his own feet. "Sir," he said, "the road is frozen to a depth I can't see the bottom of." Toby appeared on the hillside when the last Zetsu stopped moving. He came out of the air in that spiral of his, and he stood in the snow 11 meters up the slope with one orange mask and one eye whole. And he looked down at a road with 73 of his soldiers standing on it as statuary. And he said absolutely nothing at all. He watched for 11 seconds. He took the measure of it. Then he was gone, and Naruto Uzumaki straightened up off the road and knocked the frost off his palms and got back into the carriage, and Sasuke Uchiha, sitting across from him with his sword across his knees, said, 73. They will send more. That is what they are for. The summit itself was 5 Kag, 5 bodyguards, 1 round table, and 1,100 years of grudges in a snowbound hall with a fire that could not keep up. Naruto Uzumaki attended because nobody had told him he was excluded. And nobody had successfully told him he was excluded from anything since he was 6 years old and put a root extraction team on a corridor wall. Onoki of Iwa spent the first 11 minutes on Konoha's historical conduct in the Land of Grass. Mei Terumi spent 6 on Kirigakure's grievance regarding the 7 swordsmen. The Raikage put a fist through the table on the subject of his brother's bounty, and the Kazekage, Gara, 19 years old, calm, with a kanji on his forehead that had stopped meaning what it used to mean, held the room together with a patience he had learned from a specific source and had never once mentioned. At the 28th minute, Naruto spoke for the first time. "I want to be clear that I have no standing here," he said, "and I am going to use the time anyway. The organization we are discussing is down to 2 active members, and one of them is a plant. The one that matters has a body that cannot be touched, a technique that ends every waking mind in the world at once, and an army in a cave that grows. He needs the tailed beasts. He has 3. There are 6 left, and 5 of them are in this room's jurisdiction." He looked around the table. "Every minute spent on the Land of Grass is a minute he uses. I am telling you what he is doing because I have fought him on a road 11 kilometers from this building 3 hours ago, and I have read his intention, and it is this: he will let you argue. He is counting on it. It is the cheapest weapon in his inventory, and it has never once failed him." Onoki of Iwa, who was 111 years old and had buried 4 Tsuchikage, stared at a 16-year-old for a long moment. "And what do you suggest, boy?" "1 army, 1 command. Seal the Jinchuriki behind mountains and put every sealing specialist in 5 nations in the same room because he will use the dead against you, and you have never fought the dead before." Naruto stood up. "And put me at the front, because I am the only person on this continent whose techniques still work on a body that has already stopped needing to breathe." And that is when the fire went out. Every fire in the hall at once, and the darkness lasted a second and a half. And when the torches came back, there was a man in an orange mask sitting in the Hokage's chair with his elbows on the table. "Hello," Toby said. "I am Madara Uchiha, and I am here to declare the 4th Great Ninja War." The room came apart. I'm going to give you the short version of what happened in that hall, because it is a preview and the main event is later. The Raikage went first and went straight through him, through, arm shoulder deep in a phased body, and Toby caught his wrist and told him about the Eye of the Moon plan while he had it. The infinite Tsukuyomi, every living being on the planet in a shared dream, forever, with no pain in it, because there would be nothing in it at all. Then Naruto Uzumaki dropped a hand onto the floor, and every surface in that hall changed. He laid a film of ice across all of it in the opening 4 seconds. Floor, walls, ceiling, the 4 support columns, the underside of the table, and it was colorless and thin, and on gray stone it was invisible. And Toby's single visible eye was on 5 Kage and did not register it. Then Naruto started porting. Ice port. He came out of the ceiling behind Toby's head with the Kori blade, and Toby phased and the blade went through. He came out of the floor under him a half second later from a different angle, and Toby phased again. He came out of a column, out of the table, out of the wall behind the Kazekage, out of the ceiling again. 11 ports in 9 seconds, from directions that had no pattern in them. And this is the thing about Kamui, that Naruto had spent an hour on a mountain road working out. Phasing requires a moment of intent before it engages. It is a decision, and decisions take a fifth of a second. And a man who has to make a new one every 3/4 of a second stops being an untouchable ghost and starts being a man with a very difficult job. Toby stopped talking about the Eye of the Moon plan. Understand what that means. Nobody had made him stop talking in 100 years. On the 9th port, Naruto came out of the floor directly under him and got a hand around his ankle in the fraction before the phase, and the frost armor took hold. And 11 inches of Toby's right leg froze solid inside his own cloak before the technique caught up and pulled him free of his own skin. He came off the table and put 4 meters of distance between them, and for the first time in the entire engagement, he raised both hands. Mei Terumi, standing against the wall with her hands still up in a seal she had never gotten to finish, said afterward that the thing she remembered was not the ice. It was that the masked man's shoulders had changed. "I have lived through many ages," Toby said. "I have never seen cryomancy like this." Naruto Uzumaki stood in the middle of a frozen summit hall with 5 Kage behind him and a blade of ice hanging from his right hand. "I have buried stronger men than you," he said. They had the same look on their face. Toby left. He phased out through the ceiling and the summit hall was silent for 11 full seconds. Then Onoki of Iwa, 111 years old, floated 4 inches off the frozen floor and turned to the Raikage. "One army," he said. "One command, put the boy at the front." The vote was unanimous, which had happened exactly once before in recorded history. The Fourth Great Ninja War lasted 19 days. I'm going to tell it the way it should be told, which is as a handful of moments, because a war is not a fight, and it does not have a shape you can follow from the inside. 80,000 shinobi from 5 nations and 1 allied command structure that worked about, as well as a building put up by 5 people who disagreed about where the floors go. It stood. Nothing in it was square. They could handle the Zetsu. 200,000 of them came out of the ground on the first day, and the alliance held, and the cost was real, and they held. What they could not handle was the dead. In pure world reincarnation, run at a scale nobody had believed possible. Every Kaj of 4 generations, the 7 swordsmen of the mist, the 2nd generation Jinchuriki with the beasts extracted and stuffed back into their corpses, and every one of those bodies regenerating from anything you did to it, and none of them able to be reasoned with, exhausted, frightened, or killed. The war was going to be decided on whether the reanimation could be broken. Naruto Uzumaki's answer to the reanimation was never a seal. Eastern Front, Day 3, 4th hour after dawn. 6 reanimated Jonin of the 2nd Kirigakure generation had been working through the Alliance's 3rd Division infantry for 4 hours, and the division had lost 211 people, and they were dying in 6-second intervals, because a dead man with a Kiri blade does not slow down and does not miss and gets back up. A man named Ushio, 22, a Chunin from Konoha's forestry corps, who had been holding the same 40 meters of line since midnight, heard something behind him and turned around. Naruto Uzumaki walked past him up the line, took 11 steps into the open ground between the Alliance front and 6 dead swordsmen, and went down onto both hands. Permafrost. The bass roar went out, 40 meters in every direction, 30 feet down, all at once, and every reanimated body inside that radius locked from the ankles upward as the ground temperature bottomed out and the moisture in dead animated tissue set solid. 6 of them stopped mid-stride. "Glacial tomb," Naruto said, and then said it 5 more times. 6 chambers of layered ice came up out of the frozen battlefield in succession, each one sealing with a sound like a vault door. And inside each one, a dead swordsman stood in absolute minimum with his own regeneration frozen in place along with everything else. 19 seconds. 2,000 Alliance shinobi who had been screaming and dying for 4 hours stopped making any sound at all. Let that silence sit there for a second, because it is the most important sound in this entire war. 2,000 people, most of them wounded, standing in a frozen field looking at 6 ice chambers, and nobody knew what to do with their hands. Then Ushio of the forestry corps started laughing, which turned into crying, which spread down the line, and the 3rd Division's commander had to physically hold onto a standard pole to stay upright. Naruto was already gone. He had put a thread of frost across the ground on the way in, and he poured it out along it, half a kilometer at a jump, west, because there were 3 more fronts. The southern front, day 5. The second generation Jinchuriki, reanimated, 5 of them, deployed in full-tailed beast cloaks against the Sealing Corps. The Sealing Corps had 400 people in it, and 11 working seals between them, and a life expectancy that day of about 40 minutes. Naruto arrived at the nearest one, which was Han of Iwagakure, with the 5-tailed chakra boiling off him in a shell 4 stories tall. And he did something the Alliance Command could not put in a report because there was no field for it. He walked into range and stopped. He held the absolute zero aura at a low burn and let it be seen, and he looked up at the beast inside the cloak, and he spoke to it as one thing that has stood in front of Shukaku and frozen it out of the sky speaks to another. Kokuo, he said, I know what is holding you, and I know it is not asking. You have no orders in this. Be still. The 5-tailed chakra shell stopped moving forward. That is all. It stopped, and it did nothing, and every man in the Sealing Corps behind Naruto felt the pressure on their chests come off like a hand lifting. Glacial tomb, Naruto said. It went up around the dead host, and the seal inside it went to absolute minimum, and the tailed beast inside a sealed dead body in a sealed chamber of ice had no more orders from anyone at all. He did it again to Utakata of Kirigakure at the 6th hour and to Yagura at the 8th, and each one took under a minute. And by the 3rd one, the Alliance Sealing Corps had stopped even preparing their seals and had started simply following him at a distance of 40 meters like a congregation. Ino Yamanaka, running the communication network from the central command post, relayed the reports as they came in, and by the 2nd day of it, her voice had gone flat with something that was neither relief nor fear. 5th tomb confirmed. 8th. 11th. A pause. Command, he is asking for a map update. He says the reanimation's chakra output has dropped by 1/3, and he wants to know where Kabuto is running the technique from because he intends to walk there. Shikamaru Nara at the map table, with 4 days of no sleep in him, put his pencil down. Tell him we'll find it, he said. Tell him to keep freezing. They found it on day 11. Naruto walked in through the front, and Kabuto Yakushi was already gone out the back, having built his framework around one fact, and having recognized the temperature at the door, and he left the technique running because he had to, and he left the notes on how to end it on the table because some part of him had been intending to for a while. The reanimation came down on day 12. Every dead body in every glacial tomb across 3 countries came apart into ash inside its ice. And there are 1,100 chambers of layered blue still standing on those battlefields today, with nothing inside them but gray dust in a shape. He opened the cage on the night of the 18th day, in a tent behind the western line, because the last thing was coming and he intended to walk into it with everything he had. Kurama had been listening for 10 years. You are here about the masked one, the fox said. The bars were still there. Nothing behind them had changed except the eyes, which had lost something they had been carrying since before there were villages. He controlled you once, Naruto said. He put a Sharingan on you and used you to kill my mother and father and 1/3 of my village, and you have carried that for 16 years, and I have never once brought it up because it was yours. I have. I'm going to fight him tomorrow. His eye works on you. If he takes hold of you while you are behind those bars, I will spend the fight fighting both of you. Naruto put his hand on the lock. So I'm going to do the thing I told you I would do when I was 6 years old. Not because I need chakra. I have enough chakra. I am doing it so that when he reaches for you, he reaches for something that is standing up. He tore the seal off the gate. The bars came open and the 9-tailed fox stepped out of a cage it had been in for 100 years, and it stood over him in the dark of a mindscape that had been a sewer and had been slowly turning into a snowfield for about a decade. Then it laughed, and it was an awful sound, and it was the first real one it had made since the sage was alive. He will try, Kurama said, and he will find me out here. The enormous head came down until one eye the size of a house was level with the boy. Grandmaster, use me! Partner, Naruto said. That was the arrangement. Obito Uchiha came for him on the 19th day in the open ground east of the Ten Tails' incomplete husk because his plan had run out of parts, 3-tailed beasts, and the other 6 either sealed behind mountains, standing up inside their hosts, or frozen in chambers of ice on 3 battlefields with a boy's mark on the doors. His army was ash. His reanimated legion was ash. His schedule, which had been the only thing he had ever truly relied on, was 6 months behind and getting worse. So he came himself, and the fight that followed lasted an hour and 11 minutes and crossed 40 kilometers of country. And I am going to give you the parts that matter. It opened in the open ground, and it went badly for 11 minutes, because Kamui is the best defensive technique ever developed by a human being, and Obito Uchiha had been using it for 16 years. Everything went through him. Kori blade through the chest, through. Ice hammer to the skull, through. Blizzard burst across 40 meters of frontage, and a man standing in the middle of it untouched with his cloak snapping. And in between the phases, he was throwing back a Rinnegan's worth of everything. Chains, gravity, the 3 beasts, a fire technique the size of a hill. Naruto stopped trying to hit him at the 14th minute and started counting. That is the whole fight right there. He stopped fighting and started measuring, and he took hits to do it. And he took one through the left side that put an 11-inch gash under his ribs because he needed to see what Obito did when a strike came at him from a place he had already dismissed. The window is 1/5 of a second. Intent, then phase. Obito's habit, and every fighter alive has one, was to commit the intent a hair early when the incoming strike came from below his own eye line, because a man who lost an eye on his right side leads his reads with the left. Naruto found that at minute 29. He spent the next 40 minutes making Obito use it 200 times. The fight went up a mountain range at minute 34 when Obito phased through a deep freeze and came out on a ridge, and Naruto laid frost up the slope and poured it after him in half-kilometer jumps and cut him off at the crest. It came down the other side of the range in an avalanche. Both of them started. Obito put the Ten Tails husk chakra into a construct with 10 arms, and Naruto froze 4 of them off at the elbow, and the arms came down on a valley floor and are still there, and the locals farm around them. It ended in that valley at the 11th minute of the 2nd hour, with the terrain reshaped and both men at full output and nothing held back on either side. Naruto came in low from below Obito's right eye line, with the Kori blooming as he moved. Obito's intent committed a hair early. The blade entered the window. It went into the real body, through the right shoulder, front to back, angled down through the pathway junction, under the collarbone. The same shoulder a forest had taken from Orochimaru. Because Naruto Uzumaki is a man who remembers what works and does not experiment when he has a result. The Kamui failed mid-technique. Obito Uchiha came out of the phase into a body that was entirely, permanently physical, with a foot of ice in his shoulder and the cryomancy already spreading down the connected pathways into his chest. And he went to one knee in the churned valley floor. He got up. Of course he got up. He is a man who was crushed under a boulder at 13 and got up. He pulled the Rinnegan wide and reached for the last thing he had, which was never supposed to be used this way. The infinite Tsukuyomi needs the 10 tails complete and the moon as a lens, and he had neither, but he had enough of the technique to project it over a valley, over an army, over everything within 11 kilometers, and 11 kilometers included the Alliance's western reserve of 9,000 people. The sky above the valley turned red. Naruto felt it start to come down like a curtain, and he looked up at the red and black edges of it forming at the boundary of his vision, and he recognized the wallpaper. Red sky, black ground. He had been bound to a cross in a room with exactly this color scheme by a man who believed absolutely in his own technique, in a flooded street when he was 12. He remembered what he had done to that room. He closed his eyes. He breathed out. He drew the cold inward from every direction, out of 40 kilometers of valley, out of the snow melt in the ridge above, out of the 11 ice constructs still standing from the last hour, out of his own bones. And he let it concentrate. Then he opened his eyes and they were burning. Absolute zero. Full ceiling. The real one. The number he had found in a valley in the land of frost that has been uninhabitable for 4 years, and he did not aim it at Obito Uchiha, he aimed it at the air. Genjutsu is chakra propagating through a medium. The medium is the atmosphere, and in a 40-meter hemisphere around Naruto Uzumaki, the atmosphere hit a temperature at which chakra does not move through it at all, and the infinite Tsukuyomi's leading edge arrived at that boundary and stopped. Then it came apart. 9,000 people in the Western Reserve watched a red sky reach the perimeter of a white dome and break into falling shards of red and black that hit the frozen ground and were nothing at all. And Gaara of the Sand, standing on a dune at the edge of it with his brother and sister beside him, put one hand over his eyes and left it there. The curtain retreated across 11 kilometers and folded up and quit. Obito Uchiha stood in the gap where his life's work used to be. "I have lived through many ages," he said again, and his voice had something in it this time that it had never had. "I have never." "I know," Naruto said. "Every man who has stood where you are standing has told me something he has never seen before. The view from that position does not change." He took one step forward, and the ice moved with him. "I have buried stronger men than you." They had the same look on their face. The mask came off at the second step. It came off because Naruto took it off with a strike that broke the ceramic along the eye hole and carried the whole thing away into the frozen dirt, and what was under it was the thing that made two armies go silent, half a face. The right side was ruined, grafted, white, pitted, the skin of a man who had been crushed under a mountain of rock at 13 years old and rebuilt out of somebody else's cells. And the left side was young. That is what nobody was ready for. The left side of that face belonged to a boy of about 30 who had died at 13, and it had a scar under the eye, and Kakashi Hatake, standing on a ridge 400 meters away with a hand on a stone, said one word out loud and then could not say anything else. "Obito," Naruto said. "Say it." And he said it. He said it in a valley full of ice with a blade of frost in his shoulder and his hands shaking, and it took about 90 seconds, and it is the whole story. A boulder, a girl named Rin, a hand that came out of the rubble too late, a war that took his eye and his body and his side of the mountain. A man who called himself Madara feeding him a plan in a cave while he learned to walk again. Rin dying on a hand that belonged to his best friend, in the rain, in a place where nobody could have stopped it. And a decision made by a 15-year-old on a battlefield with everything already gone. That a world with this in it is a wrong world, and that a dream with none of it in it would be a kindness, and that anyone who fought to stay awake simply had not lost enough yet. "I was going to give them all of it back," Obito said. "Everyone. Every dead person ate every ruined thing. Everyone's whole life the way they wanted it. Forever. That is what I was building. That is all it ever was." "I know," Naruto said. "I have been in a place made of somebody else's dream. Everyone in it was at peace and none of them were there." He walked the last 4 steps. "You lost a girl and an eye and half a body when you were 15, and you decided the world had failed the test," he said. "I lost a brother and my own soul, and 11 years in a realm that is on fire, and I got up in the morning and did the boring version, and it took me a lifetime, and I built something out of it. You had the same choice I had, and you had more time than I did." His hand came up. "You spent it on this." Obito Uchiha looked at him with one Sharingan and one Rinnegan and the face of a dead 13-year-old on one side of his skull. "Then finish it," he said. Deep freeze. Point blank into the sternum at full output. The beam went into Obito Uchiha's chest and did not come out the other side because there was nothing on the other side left to travel through. The freeze took his ribs, his heart, both lungs, the grafts, the white cells crawling under the right side of his skin, and the entire chakra network of the strongest living Uchiha, and it did it in 3/4 of a second, and the temperature differential across his body was severe enough that the tissue could not hold together. He came apart in a single flat crack. There was no long collapse, and there was nothing left standing. The man who had run the Akatsuki for 16 years, who had killed a 4th Hokage's wife and taken a 9-tailed fox and built a plan to end the waking world, burst into a scatter of blue-white across 40 feet of frozen valley floor. and the shards came down on the ice and rang, and then the valley was still. Naruto Uzumaki stood in the middle of it with a hole in his side and frost coming off his shoulders. Then he went down on one knee, because an hour and 11 minutes is an hour and 11 minutes, and Sasuke Uchiha reached him first out of 11 people who were running. The war ended the way wars end, which is badly. 11,406 dead across 19 days in 3 countries. 2 entire divisions of the Alliance reduced below operational strength. Every field hospital in the Land of Iron and the Land of Fire full for 4 months. The Land of Rain took the Zetsu breeding caves and burned them for 6 weeks, and the smoke went so high that farmers in 3 countries lost a harvest to it. Konoha's northern district was still rubble. Kirigakure had lost 4 of its 7 swordsmen's graves to their own reanimated occupants. There were 300 children in the Land of Wind who would need somewhere to go, and Gaara took all of them, personally, in a decision his own council fought him on for 11 days and lost. The victory was real. The victory was necessary. The victory did not come clean, and anyone who tells the story with a clean ending on it is selling you something. They started carving the memorial stones in the 2nd week. 2 weeks after that, in a field outside a village that had been a battlefield, new grass was coming up through the churned soil in patches. It came up green and wrong-looking, in rows that had nothing to do with the way anybody had planted, following the shape of tracks that had been dug into that ground by 10,000 pairs of feet. The stonecutters were working 400 meters away, and you could hear the chisels. Naruto Uzumaki was sitting on the ground with his back against a tree, watching the field. The mask was off and hanging around his throat. His face was young, still young, always young, 16 and a half years old, with a healing gash under the left ribs and eyes that were their own natural blue, the ordinary kind, the glacial coming only when he reaches for it. Shikamaru Nara came across the field and sat down next to him without asking, which is the correct way to do it, and he did not say anything for a while. That is the thing Naruto values most about Shikamaru Nara, and he has never told him. The man understands that silence is a complete sentence. They sat there for 11 minutes. Somewhere behind them a cart went past with stone in it. Eventually Shikamaru said, "What do you do now?" Naruto looked out at the field where the grass was coming in. The Lin Kuei's purpose was to serve, he said. Somebody's blade for hire for 1,000 years. Then it became something worse than that, and I spent a lifetime taking it back, and when I had it back, I had to decide what it was for. He was silent for a moment. This world's purpose was to endure. That is all it has ever done. 4 wars, 5 villages, children in cells, and everybody in it congratulating themselves on how much they could carry. I want to know what it does when it does not have to endure. Shikamaru turned that over. That's a bigger job than the war was, he said. It is. The war took 19 days. He got his hand under himself and stood up off the base of the tree, and he pulled the mask up over his face, and the frost came off his shoulders in the spring air and drifted down over the new grass without settling on it. There is work.
Thanks for watching the full story of the Frost Grandmaster. From a cold cell to rewriting the fate of the ninja world, every freeze, every fight, and every quiet moment of mercy hit different. If you felt that energy, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around for more wild what-if legends just like this one. See you in the next one.